All right, call to order at 6:30. We'll start with announcements. And are there any announcements? Go ahead, Julia.
Yeah, I don't know if this qualifies as an announcement, but I wanted to read a letter that the chairman and I sent to a member of the Healdsburg City Council, and with the understanding it would be read at their meeting tonight, where they're considering whether they're going to approve the amended joint powers agreement. So is it okay to do that?
Sure.
Okay.
I think.
Honorable Mayor and City Council members, the JPA has been under review for the past year by a dedicated committee of elected officials and city staff. An amended JPA is now being presented for final changes, or if none are requested, for approval. The signatories on the current JPA are the County of Sonoma and the cities of Healdsburg, Sonoma, Santa Rosa, and Petaluma. Any amendments to the JPA must be unanimously approved by these 5 original entities. While the amended JPA makes several significant changes to the governance of the library, we write to address only one of those changes. The underlying foundation of our library system, secured by the current JPA, is equity of service. The amended JPA allows for disparity of service between the branches funded by outside resources. The Library Commission strongly opposes this change. We recognize that equity of service does not translate to uniformity of service. Each city provides a building based on its financial ability. Each Friends of the Library group funds programs and one-time cost items as requested by their local branches. However, it sets equity as the goal towards which we strive, and it does result in equity of hours. That is, branches are open the same number of hours, though not necessarily on the same schedule. By allowing disparate hours of service, the amended JPA fundamentally changes the principles upon which our library system was built. It will have 2 practical negative effects. First, it opens the door for disparity of service to become the norm. It will make fundraising for countywide service hours more difficult. Before people will agree to participate in a solution to a problem, they must believe there is a problem that needs fixing. For those in wealthier communities who can afford to extend their library hours, there won't be a problem. Those in communities without the resources will continue to receive less service. To allow the have more cities better library service than the have less cities is completely against the spirit of the Sonoma County Library System. Second, it will change the library's relationship with its support groups. Funding programs and one-time costs is significantly different than funding operations, salaries, benefits, retirement, etc. It is one thing to be a benefactor, it is another to be an employer. As longtime members of the library's governing body, we are intimately familiar with the workings of the library and gravely concerned about the consequences, intended and unintended, of this change. After deep and careful consideration, we urge you to reject the amended JPA unless the provision allowing disparity of service is removed. And it's signed by Tim May, Chair of the Sonoma County Library Commission, and Julia Fries, JPA Committee Representative, Sonoma County Library Commission. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Can I make a suggestion that we send this to each of the cities and to the Board of Soups?
Certainly.
All right, and if anyone else would like to sign it, that's possible also. Any other announcements? All right, moving on to public appearances. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to items not on the agenda? Being none, moving on to the part of the agenda where library advisory boards may speak to the commission regarding any issues that have come up in their labs or any issues. No members of labs wishing to speak. We'll move on to the next item. Special discussion item, the annual audit with our familiar face, Will. And I believe there may be some change in the agenda you're going to ask for or not, or?
No.
No, okay. All right, so do you want to get us started, Will, or?
Sure. Should I start with questions from the commission before I dive into some of the areas that I want to hit?
Oh, well, we can start there. Are there any questions from the commission specifically?
I had a question. I wasn't sure, I didn't see, but I maybe wasn't looking in the right place, where the money that we have earmarked in our reserves towards the retirement, unfunded retirement benefits shows up in the document.
I don't believe that you had reserved that as of June 30, 2013. My recollection is that you were having that as a discussion item in the 13-14 budget. I don't believe it was in the June 30, 13 approved budget.
I took a look at the budget documents for 13-14, and it's mentioned as an item for the 13-14 budget. So a year from now, you'll see something in the financial statements of 13-14.
Yes, sir.
There'll be a fund balance reserved.
Which will be a committed fund balance
Right.
because you haven't permanently set it aside. But in the June 30, 13
Okay.
budget, it was not in there.
I thought we did it before also.
Are you thinking about before this current fiscal year? You mean the prior fiscal year, February? You would have had to do this in February,
We're doing this in
February of 11.
arrears.
Right.
Yeah, I think
Right.
we had the discussion, and then
Yeah.
we'll made our decision to have the dedicated, committed.
Because
funding.
I recall back,
Right,
for me, I know it was during tax season, Sandy had asked for some help because she was preparing the budget document and wanted to figure out how to work that line item into it.
okay,
But she was working on the 13-14 budget
okay.
for the commission.
I thought we did it as part of an amended budget because we had the
some
money and
extra
we
money.
added money to the extra health budget at the same time. And we set the money aside at that point.
That was my impression also.
I think it was part of an amended budget.
I actually have the amended budget
It was not?
with me. I have the 13-14 budget as well.
Okay.
Does it matter if it was part of the amended budget or shows up in 13-14?
Well, I guess it's a matter of, really, the only thing that it will change in your financial statements is on page 5. This is the only area that it will change. Page 5, that bottom section there, we're actually right in the middle of the page where it displays your fund balances, committed, assigned, and unassigned. What you'll see is a third committed portion of the general fund, which would then be committed for OPEB funding. And so basically what will happen is the dollar amount that you prescribe to be committed for that would be carved out of that $2 million unassigned bucket and moved up into a committed line balance. So it won't change the net income of the library for the year, but it does move it up into a committed fund balance. But I can go back and we can have staff double check the minutes too, but I'm 99% certain that it's a 13-14 budget discussion item that you had.
Okay.
The 13-14 budget's actually opening right now.
Any other questions from the commission before Will dives into the pool?
Do you want us to ask questions about the findings at this point as well, or?
Sure, I'll take all of the questions, and then whatever doesn't get hit, I'll include in areas that I thought were important as well.
I was curious, these findings, some of them appear to be things that were probably long-term deficits, deficiencies that we've had.
Yeah, so-
And they were not in last year's audit, so I'm wondering what,
I'm glad you brought that up
Happened.
because I guess I wanted to preface the findings with some of them are long-term type findings, which we've talked about at the commission level every single year, but never documented them as significant deficiencies because several of them on their own are really not significant deficiencies. Like the first one, for example, the lack of an accounting policies and procedures manual isn't a significant deficiency except for when you lose your CFO. and those documented accounting policies and procedures aren't there, and staff maybe doesn't have all of the competencies that the CFO had and doesn't have a manual to follow, which results in some of the other findings causing it to be significant. For example, the second one, 2013-02, is indicative of the lack of accounting policies and procedures in that office. Because they were undocumented, at year end, there were over $100,000 worth of invoices recorded in the wrong year, causing us to spend several visits retesting and retesting and retesting invoices and cash disbursements at year end until we got comfortable that materially invoices were in the right year. So, yeah.
They paid in the correct year and just recorded in the wrong year?
It was actually a whole chain of errors. It was primarily around the receipts of materials that were received downstairs and stamped into the correct year based on when they were ordered. They came upstairs with the correct date stamp on them, and then because of the lack of accounting policies and procedures and the lack of a CFO and the lack of supervision, they were inadvertently recorded into the wrong year because they were following just the calendar of this is what I'm supposed to do during this period of time, not necessarily following what should have been done, looking at the invoice date, looking at the received date, looking at what downstairs had stamped it. It then went to the county with 2 different dates and never got kicked back for clarification. So we ended up testing well over $1 million worth of cash disbursements right at year end until we could get comfortable that materially they were in the right year, which has never happened before during the audit.
Okay. So that's new.
Yes. I mean, we have a few cutoff issues once in a while, like the PG&E bill doesn't get split over the right periods because it straddles June and July, but nothing like we had this year.
Can you, if you can, would you give us your view of which of these findings really are directly tied to the lack of a CFO? And which ones
I
are
would say
larger?
that 2013-2 is due to lack of CFO. It was basically lack of supervision. And no one in the office had an accounting policies and procedures manual to follow, which is why the availability of financial reporting information, 2013-5, it's a combination of lack of CFO and then lack of ability to change. We've, I think for several years now, been discussing with management and the commission the need for greater clarity in the financial reporting and the ability to have information departmentalized so that decision-making can be pushed down through management and responsibility can be pushed down through management. Right now, all of the financial information is literally top-level reporting. It's all the way at the top of the library, and really the only person that can be held accountable is the director, because it's really difficult to hold management accountable when you can't budget departmentally. When Elisa vacated her position, and as auditors, we became more communicative with the county and FAMOUS and the financial reporting systems, really trying to assist management and the commission with closing some gaps on that financial reporting. We found that some of the information you're looking for actually can be done in FAMOUS. It just requires a large workload to get it set up, and it changes the way operations in the budget and finance office have to happen. For example, when a PG&E bill comes in, you can't just record it to utilities. You'd have to record it to a utility expense for every branch, not just one account number. And so I think it's a combination of not having a CFO, but also not having a CFO that's willing to make changes to the information that's there and available. I hope that answers your question.
Were any of the others tied to the lack of a CFO?
The 2013-07
Right.
supervision.
And in terms of the responses, should we wait on our questions for that? 'Cause that's-
No, I guess my other general comment about the lack of the CFO is that our audit was workload-wise 3 to 4 times greater than it has been in the past due to the lack of the CFO. And had Bruce not been brought on, or someone in Bruce's capacity not been brought on, we likely would not have issued a report this year.
I had a question about the library's response, but I guess that would get directed to management. So the response to 2013-05 in terms of adopting the new program that the library the county is implementing. We had long discussions about that about a year and a half ago when we found out that the county was first going to be adopting a new financial software. And we had charged then CFO with looking into whether we wanted to indeed continue to use the county's, to change with the county, or whether there was a software out there that would be more workable for us, that was still compatible with the county, so that we could continue to communicate software to software. And that, of course, all fell by the wayside with Elisa leaving. But the question still remains, what are we going to invest in the county's system? And if it doesn't suit us, then what do we have to reinvest? How much have we lost in trying to, and then go out and find another software? What's it going to cost us to go with the county on this thing?
They haven't told us yet.
But do we pay an upfront, lump sum, sunk cost, non-retrievable, if we change our mind in 12, 24 months, or is it our per use cost goes up, or we pay an annual licensing fee or something?
Yeah, the county's pricing structure will be basically how much of it you use. So they'll evaluate the amount of data you have in their system, maybe the amount of transactions, something of that nature. It's not a case where we buy a license and then once you own it, if you decide you don't like it, a year later, you've just lost all that money. So my understanding right now is they'll be coming out soon with a pricing structure that will most likely increase our costs if we keep our current status. Now, the reason I put that caveat in there is if the JPA goes forward and the commission becomes less controlled by the county board of supervisors, then we become more independent. I guess on one hand, that means the library will have to issue its own financial report and a lot of activities. But on the other hand, the county has to do less work, and they say the pricing would be lowered. With all that said, I think at this time, the library almost is past the point of return in terms of going with the new financial system. I just don't think there would be enough time to go out, research, do an RFP, buy something, get it implemented, get the training, get your account structure set up, do the data conversion. You just don't have that much time left. So,
Will we be able to do the account structure that we've been talking about, where it's cost accounting at the branch level with this system? Will we be able to build that up front?
yeah, I believe that the new system will provide a level of detail so that you can drop down and as we've heard, it appears it could have been accomplished with Famous with a lot of work. But the new system will have a lower level account structure so that you can code things at a more detailed level and then summarize up. So, you know, you do it, if you set your lowest level as the branch level or the organization level, and record all your expenditures, all your transactions, et cetera, at that level, and then it summarizes up as you say, well, I just want, you know, I want to look at it by the entity, I want to look at it by the branch, I want to, you know, et cetera.
But if I understand what you're saying, it's not like that there's going to come a magic date where we have to write a big check. It's going to be our ongoing usage, we're going to pay a higher amount, but that, say, 24 months from now, we said this system really does not work, and we go out and have identified an alternative, we haven't purchased something.
We have, yeah, we don't have a sunken asset, as you'd say, or money under the, you know,
Right.
down the river, so to speak. That's my understanding. We would then be paying a monthly service fee as we are now. It'll be, undoubtedly, it'll be higher. They've bought a very large, up-to-date, expensive system. They're going to have to recover those costs one way or the other. But as you asked, if 2 years down the road, you say, this just isn't working for us. You can go, you know, you'll be able to go out, take a look around, shop around, do an RFP, you know, bring in a new system and set a date, which, you know, usually for convenience, it's July 1, and convert.
Is there any way to estimate at this point the resources man hours it will take, the resources it's going to take to load this new system and learn it and get people to actually be able to tell whether it's going to work for us?
The current system, one of the advantages, a lot of the work is being done by the county. They're setting up the conversion charts, et cetera, and when we get later on in the agenda, we'll talk about some of the important things, how that relates to us. But there is a significant amount of training time. We've spent time developing, and I say we, you know, for the most part, the current staff has spent time developing a chart of accounts, and as we proceed, there'll be more and more training required. We will be picking up some of the workload. Now everything we do gets shipped out to the county to get input into the computer. This will be more interactive. We'll start to actually put things in. We're on a separate payroll system that we'll just do up journal vouchers out of the payroll system and just record it into the new system. So yeah, there will be some effort, and there's no denying it. If you get a year down the road or 2 years down the road and you say this isn't working for us, yeah, there'll be some lost investment in time and staff costs, those kinds of things. I think one of the great opportunities here is PeopleSoft is a big software company, and you see, you know, that name, you see that name in the public sector a lot. You get the chance to try it, and without having to go to PeopleSoft and buy it and then find out you don't like it. You know, I mean, there is a kind of an upside. They're a major player in the governmental accounting or automated arena, and this affords you the opportunity to try it. And if you don't like it, you will have then spent the time to identify what it is you don't like and what it is you do like when you go out and look for a new system. Right now, you don't have that expertise, I don't think, in-house, because people haven't had the opportunity or the level of sophisticated software to know how it should be. You know, so there's a learning process, I think, that has to take place.
On the heels of what Bruce was just saying too, I think keep in mind that it's not necessarily a complete loss if you decide to abandon the county's system 24 to 36 months from now, because a lot of the upfront work you're doing is collaboration and building your general ledger to expand it, to improve your financial reporting clarity to the point where you feel comfortable with what you're seeing. You're gonna take that information and move it into some new database should you decide to leave the county. So the upfront hours you're spending really are not a waste.
And Patrick, the CFO position closes on on Friday, and how are the applications looking?
Not good.
All right.
We've only received one so far. Now, it's not uncommon at the last week before closing that you get, a number come through, but we're feeling a little bit nervous at the moment. I would have expected at least 5 by now, so.
Yikes. Okay, and my next question is maybe academic, but will there be a way through the interview process to let whoever is coming in, to know whether whoever is coming in, that they're going to be facing some interesting challenges?
Most definitely.
All right, so, and what's our backup plan if we only have one applicant?
We frankly haven't developed one yet. I've got some thoughts in mind, but I'm going to be sitting down with Bruce this week and see what other options we may have.
Does it make sense to consider expanding the director search to include a CFO?
That is one of the options, and we have discussed it previously. And one of the firms, well, the firm that we're recommending for this director, there is an option for a bare bones search, which we might want to consider using for the CFO.
Okay, any other questions from the commission before? Okay,
Okay. Why don't, since we're on the findings, are you okay if we continue from there, even though it's in the back? So 2013-1 and 2, I think we covered. 2013-3 is lack of a formal gift acceptance policy, and we've talked about this one at the commission level before as well. It needs to be heightened, and it needs to have attention drawn to it for several reasons. One, gifts that come in aren't necessarily properly designated. Not everything that comes in is well documented. For example, this summer there were some books that came in to the library that ended up being given to a friends group that were quite valuable. And in the financial reporting world, if donations are coming across the desk of the library, unless they're specifically designated for a friends group, that's the library's financial gift, not an external financial gift to another nonprofit. And so the gift acceptance policies really need to be tightened up so that you know what's coming in, you acknowledge what it's for, you track what it's to be used for, and there's no uncertainty as to where those gifts are to be spent, used, reserved, kept for perpetuity. And I think there's a lot of lack of clarity around that, and it's.
So is it just an acceptance policy, or is it also a tracking mechanism that you're talking about?
Both.
Sounds like.
Both.
Okay.
and has any work been done on the gift? Where are we on that?
We've been collecting samples, and I put together a draft gift acceptance policy that's now with Bruce and Jamie, and will be looked at together later this week. The procedural aspects are a little more complex. It's harder to get your hands on government or even charitable organizations' actual procedural documentation, but I've got some of that now too. So I think we'll, rather than reinvent the wheel, hope to find really good examples out there and use those as the measure for our own. So yeah, I think we're making pretty quick progress at this point.
So will we see the proposal in January?
I would say February, the first budget workshop.
I agree.
Just these findings too, I think it's tough for Jamie and David to come in and sort of be blasted with management findings, because the gift acceptance policy, we actually delivered some, as your auditor, delivered samples to management 2 years ago that have just been hatching. So, I don't take it out on, don't
We're
take
not
it out on
taking-
these two.
no, not at all,
But
not at all.
can I ask
Okay.
another question? Will the new county software, does that include a mechanism we might be able to use for the tracking of the gift policies? Or whatever, not the gift policies, the gifts that come in a better way than we have been?
I think your gift acceptance policy, we struggle with this at the Education Foundation that I sit on, that you kind of have to take a bit of a step back and develop your policy around internally what your staff can manage in terms of tracking, right? So your gift acceptance policy, while you don't want to offend the donor in the acceptance of the gift, and you do want to recognize them and direct their gift into their area of interest, you also want to make it reasonable to manage from the administrative perspective. And I think that's where, as a group, you need to start.
But that train has left the station and moving along at this point.
Yes.
All right, that's good news. All right, and so now on.
So 2013.
First of all, any more questions from the commission about that? Okay, go ahead.
2013-4 has risen to the surface. You have implemented the fixed asset software that we recommended, and that's actually working much better. You haven't performed a physical inventory of your fixed assets since 2003, I believe, nearly 10 years. And now that the fixed asset software is implemented, there is a disparity between the detail in the fixed asset inventory and what's currently carried on Famous, which is not uncommon to have that happen. And the majority of your assets are fully depreciated anyways, so I'm not concerned about a material financial misstatement, but I am concerned that the detailed listing doesn't necessarily coincide with possibly what you have anymore, and it is time, 10 years later, to do a physical inventory. And it coincides with 2013-6, which is the Capital Improvement Fund. The physical inventory of assets and the ledger also, I think, coincides with this finding whereby your capital improvement fund balance, the committed fund balance for capital improvements, doesn't really have a lot of basis to the number. And we really recommend that you take a look at a replacement policy, kind of segregating your large assets versus your small assets. Bruce and I and Jamie and David have kind of talked about several approaches, but you do need some basis to that committed fund balance, not just sort of a number that got thrown up there based on a couple Axia studies, I think, that were done, and some planned branch improvements, but there isn't a lot of basis like there is for the stabilization fund that you built. And so those two findings kind of go hand in hand.
Is there a best practice with the frequency with which we actually should do the physical inventory, and that we should build that into some kind of future policy that every X, I presume it's more frequent than every 10 years?
Some of your again, I think it goes back to the capital improvement fund and how you look at establishing that, because your fixed assets are really, you can segregate them into kind of the large, really identifiable assets like trucks and air conditioning units if you're responsible for them. And then you've got smaller ones like chairs and tables. I think your large items, you should inventory them almost annually. I mean, they're somewhat material to your financial statements. And then the smaller ones, maybe every 5 years.
So we should have a policy that talks to that somewhere.
Yes.
And I'm interested to find out why it's been 10 years since, you may not know the answer.
No, the reason why is that you never previously had to keep a ledger of your fixed assets. In government accounting, fixed assets were always just expensed as you purchased them. You never depreciated them like you do in private industry. And when GASB 34 was implemented 10 years ago, you were required to inventory your fixed assets at that time, dig up what their historical cost was, or assign your best knowledge of that to them, and sort of begin your fixed asset ledger.
Well, do we need to physically inventory depreciated assets, or only things that are not fully depreciated?
It's tough. For you, ordinarily, I would say you probably don't need to inventory your fully depreciated fixed assets, but because you use your fixed assets for much longer beyond their depreciable life, and you have trucks that are fully depreciated that are still, it would be nice to know that they exist.
Well, and also if you were trying to build some kind of a going forward replacement cycle, even if they're fully depreciated, at some point, they're not going to keep running,
yes.
and we have to estimate beyond the depreciation cutoff when we actually
Yes.
need to replace them, right?
And as a result of it too, you may decide as management to sort of repunt what your estimated useful lives are. Right now, you have useful lives that you use for every type of asset, but you may decide that you're using them longer or shorter now and want to revise those lives as well. But it hasn't been looked at in at least 10 years.
How is that software working?
It's fine. We didn't have any problems during the audit. I don't know if internally the office is struggling with it, but.
I think the software that we have, one, I'm not an expert in it, or I haven't used it a whole lot. I've used it a little bit. You know, it provides, you know, what is needed. It's really, I think, on the other side of the coin, or is that a policy would lay out, you would have your assets, you would break them down by category. You would then say you're going to inventory each category, you know, on some sort of frequency. You would then be able to, once you do that, you can clean up the inventory listing. It helps also make sure that you still have the asset, even if, you know, if it's fully depreciated. And I was looking at the listing, your value right now is about 50% of the cost of the assets. So that tells me that, like Will said, a significant portion of them are fully depreciated, but we're still using them, presumably. And that'll be one task, is to go out and find this stuff and see if it's still there, or did it get, you know, sold, or, you know, thrown in the trash can, or what, you know, when it didn't work anymore. Once you get a handle on your fixed asset system and you got a policy and people know where the assets are, I mean, you probably have people that don't even know where you know, they started working 5 years ago, they don't, you know, oh, I'm not quite sure where that is. Once you have that and you go through that transition, then it's not that hard to do an asset. Everybody knows what asset inventory, everybody knows what needs to be done. You send out the form, you have the form, everybody's familiar with it, they go find it, they write down the asset number, the location, they initial off, they send it back, and it goes fairly quickly, especially for the library. I mean, relatively, there's not that many.
Remember too that a few years ago you did identify your capitalization policy to be anything greater than $5,000. So we've moved past the point of capitalizing every microphone, telephone. So those little tiny items that move around a lot more are no longer being added to your fixed asset ledger. So it is much more identifiable, the things that are being added to it.
Can I ask, what is the anticipated, again, human resource cost? Is it a huge project to do the update now, and then, you know, as you said, once we get it under control and keep it going, it won't be as much, but what are we talking about to start it?
Well, I talked to the budget staff about, we need to start pulling together a fixed asset policy, I can help with that. We need to do an inventory. And the response back was, well, who's going to do that? And I said, we are. And they gasped.
That's not a good show.
So I'm still working on that portion of it. I got to work on my salesmanship. But I anticipate that we'll pull
What-
together.
If I can add, but what is a fixed asset? I mean, is it size or value? What determines
Value.
value?
And for the most part, it's value. I don't know, when I'm looking at that,
It's an
you know, like
asset,
the
it's an asset
trucks,
with a useful life of greater than 1 year.
1 year.
May I ask a question of Will about fixed assets and if, whether you know of, in the library world, I mean, I'm accustomed to actually being asked the size and value of the collection as part of that fixed assets, but I don't believe that's on our current fixed asset inventory.
That's correct. There are some rules around how collections are to be treated, and historically, you have always expensed yours as it's purchased, and so once you establish a methodology, you stick with it.
I have a question about the accounts policy and procedure manual for staff and you, about what is the size of that task in terms of developing that and getting started on that and timelining that?
The method that I've had most success with on something of that nature is you sit down and you say, you know, we need one policy a month written up. We need to document one procedure a month or one every 2 months. And there's certain times of the year where it's just not going to work. When you're preparing the budget or working on the year-end financials, there just isn't that kind of, you know, the time is just all sucked up. But once you're in a portion of the calendar where it's not unreasonable to say, well, let's sit down and document how you, you know, what's the flow for an accounts payable invoice. The invoice comes into the library, okay, let's document what happens there, who approves it, how does it get dealt with, where does it end up? And you do that one. And then you say, okay, now we're going to do another one about buying capital or, you know, accounting procedures or something of that nature. I think it's one of these cases of, if you look at the top of the mountain, you say, we can't. But if you take it one at a time, pretty soon, all of a sudden, you say, geez, man, we got a lot of these policies written and pulled together.
And in some respects, you have a few that are already, I guess, semi-documented, because during the audit, we require staff to update basically their internal control memorandums for areas that they're responsible for. So we've got audit memorandums about exactly who's responsible for payroll and the processes that they go through to process payroll. So payroll, accounts receivable, vouchers payable, a few of those areas, I guess, are semi-documented already from the internal control process performed during the audit, and they could build on those as well.
Part of my concern is we're talking about a lot of things that need to be done, which we've been doing for several years. And also related to that is the issue of Patrick saying that we only have one applicant so far. You're time limited. We're going to be in a position where we're CFO-less, possibly. And so we need to be able to have, you know, this feels really urgent so that we don't get am I speaking? I mean, I haven't gone to the conclusion, but do people understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it is important.
Right.
You know, getting the fixed asset inventory is important. Getting some of these procedures documented is important. You know, developing a budget, et cetera. You have these competing priorities.
Right, I understand.
And so I think that it's a matter of saying, well, we're going to set priorities and what we need to get done and when, and we're going to attempt to accomplish as much as we can, and
Okay.
I think can get an inventory taken care of. I think we can build a little bit on the documentation. We can, obviously we got to get a budget rolled out. And just all the things that need to be done. It's a matter of getting them on a list, getting them in front of you, getting priorities to them, and then doing it.
Okay.
So any other questions on the findings? I think I'm happy to answer any other questions, but I think we've covered them all. Why don't we flip forward to page 26, and we'll look at that quickly. That's your budget versus actual. And in light of the financial statement findings that we talked about and some of the cutoff issues and lack of policies, I do think it's important to acknowledge that your expenditures, even in the absence of a CFO for the year, were controlled quite well when compared to budget versus actual. The variance on the capital outlay line, I guess I'd like to call that out just because that variance of $269,000, I think, actually has to do with just some of the remodel costs coming in 1 year versus the other. And so some of those costs that were expected in those budgeted amounts for 2012-13 were actually picked up in the year before. So there wasn't necessarily a tremendous savings on capital outlay, but it just happened to be when the construction costs actually ended up getting incurred. But salaries and benefits and operating overhead, which are the primary portions of your expenditures, were controlled quite well on budget versus actual. The other area that we should talk about is up on page 22, which is, I know the commission's favorite discussion item, other post-employment benefits. The actuarial study that we used for this particular set of financial statements was the actuarial study that was performed as of November 2011, I believe, off the top of my head. And you will be due for another actuarial study before the next set of financial statements is ready, based on A, the age of your old actuarial study, and then B, some of the new terms that were entered into around benefits. So you will need to have another actuarial study performed.
And the status of that is I've identified 3 or 4 actuaries, and we'll be contacting them. I called another agency and got some names, 2 names from people they've used, and that was the Napa Sanitation District. And I know a couple of the other names. I recognize the names on a list that I have. And we'll call them, we'll send them some basic information about our retiree health plan, and request that they let us know exactly what information they need from us in order to provide a proposal or a bid. I'm thinking that it's probably going to be, less than $5,000. So,
Off the top of my head, I think they've been around 3 in the past.
right. And I'm thinking when you have a new one, they maybe have a setup fee, for the first time. So, but nonetheless, if it comes in under $5,000 or thereabouts, then we'll have 3 or 4 of them hopefully to pick from, and we'll pick one and get on with the task of getting a updated actuarial study.
Bruce, did you look to see if because this is the second, I think the second actuarial study that this existing firm has performed. Did the price go down in the second year at all, or did?
No, it was, the last two, I believe, are the same. I looked back in the purchase order and they're approximately the same price.
Okay, okay. I mean, management is ahead of the game on the actuarial study. It's not delayed, it's not delinquent. It just needs to be performed by the next annual audit. So that footnote disclosure there shouldn't be unfamiliar anymore. Does anybody have any questions about the expense that was incurred for 2013, the additional liability that was accrued? You can see in that table there at the bottom of page 22, based on the study that was current as when the financial statements were prepared, your annual required contribution based on existing staff, existing benefits, and existing promises is just about almost 1.3 million per year, 1.275 million. $240,000 is the approximate amount of interest that you're incurring on your unfunded liability based on the interest rates that are assumed in the actuarial study. And your annual OPEB costs, including interest and the ARC adjustment, is 1.35 million, for which you are currently funding about 536,000, increasing the OPEB liability by 819,000 for 1 year.
So, assuming that we are able on an annual basis to contribute to the dedicated funds, you know, the committed funds to address this in the future, right? By putting it just into that other committed fund line,
Yes.
it doesn't really bring down any of the future
does not.
interest cost or anything else?
It does not, no.
All it does is kind of move it into that bucket, like it's sort of
Correct.
out there to help in the future.
Correct.
Is
If
it,
you're moving it into committed, if you are actually funding it into a plan,
I know,
moving it outside of the library's control, then yes,
but
it
we're
will.
not ready to do that.
Right.
that's eventually, do we need to set up a trust, or is there companies that we move it into, or when we're ready to do that, what does that look like?
You would either need to A, set up a trust, or B, move the money to be managed by a third party.
And I think most of the agencies that have post-employment benefits eventually get to the point where the money goes to a third party to be administered. Just if you, one, auditors feel better about it. And
There's a number of reasons. I mean, just the cost of administering it yourself would typically exceed whatever fee the third party was charging you on custodying those assets.
Well, I think at first we need to build up some money to do that.
Yes.
with, and also get a comfort level that we can keep it.
I mean, it would require you to have a whole nother bag of policies to
Right.
be able to manage those funds yourself.
But it continues to be one of our top financial,
Yes, so your unfunded liability, your estimated unfunded liability at the end of the 2013 fiscal year is $5.6 million.
In terms of the policies, are there, you know, we are so short-staffed in both staffing and management, but especially in our management. Are there, I don't know, what you call them, extra help? Are there contract people who come in and help just draft policies? And would it make sense for us to consider funding something like that in the short term to get some of this stuff cleared out and working?
it's actually an item I have on my budget list. In terms as we move forward in the budget process, one is if the commission, you know, in terms of funding this effort of policies, would the commission want to put some money towards that effort, or it just becomes a higher priority for staff, which would displace something else.
Anything else, Will?
Any other questions on OPEB? The only other area that I thought we should look at together is pages 5 and 6, sorry. 5 and 6 are your governmental fund statements, which break out the assets and liabilities of the general fund and your special revenue funds. Page 5, I guess I'd like to call out, under the general fund, keep in mind that this particular set of statements more closely reflects what you're used to seeing from your famous reports and in terms of budgeting, but it does not include the liability for OPEB in this statement. When you look at the liability balance, you will only see vouchers payable in that liability balance. And so if you follow the general fund down and look at your fund balances that are available, you've got roughly 1.6 million committed for capital improvements, 1.9 million for your stabilization fund, 461,000 for your assigned fund balance, leaving $2 million unassigned when you've got roughly a $5.6 million OPEB liability looming around out there. So your commitments are getting spread kind of thin.
We're broke.
What did you say?
Looking long-term, I
More than
think
that.
you might want to start projecting your budgets out a little bit further than you currently do to see if it's really possible to fund that OPEB balance at the level you want to fund and make some projections a little further out, yes.
And I think, people like Stockton and San Bernardino are broke. We have options still. And although we have a $5 million liability and OPEB $5.6 million, we have these other big ticket items. We do have a stream of resources coming in that I think if we sit, when we sit down and start working on the budget and have the budget workshop and assign some priorities and start coming up with some budgeting solutions, you're not going to solve 5.6 in 1 year or 2 years. That's going to have to get spread out. How much money you put in for capital improvements, the same thing. But I do think that there is some options to at least start to get on the path of fixing these things. And that's what I'm looking forward to for the budget.
So if we look at the trend on that, when I'm looking at what you gave us on page 22, we started the year with that as, if I'm reading this right, as a $4.8 million liability, and now we're at 5.6.
You're growing at a rate of between 800,000 and 900,000 a year.
And if we look at the trend of the last 5 years, is that, are we kind of straight line?
It's tough, and I don't know if any of you have read the actuarial study in its entirety. It's really not that boring of a read, and it gives you a lot of information about the assumptions that are built into it and what your existing policies are and information about your current employment base.
Right.
It's really tough to change how fast your liability is accruing unless you are changing your promise of existing benefits or hiring people under a totally new structure. You're not going to slow down the train that you've already put on the tracks, is I guess what's tough about your existing OPEB. And I think at this point, everyone's very understanding of, hey, the library has made a promise to me when they hired me. Like we do somehow need to make sure it gets paid for, because in the end, I need that. I've committed my employment to it. So it's not, I don't think you're going to see your liability accrue at a slower rate.
Okay.
Unless one of those two things happens, which I don't think. I don't know that legally they can. That's
Well,
outside of-
one thing I think that will be interesting with the new actuary is the change in the benefit for the future. That, and I'm not an actuary, but it just, makes sense that that's going to have a positive impact in terms of lowering the future costs of the OPEB liability.
For the new tier, Bruce?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Once you start hiring in under that new tier.
Yeah.
So essentially, what I'm hearing from you is information that's coming to staff, basically. It's alerts to us, but it's statements to staff as we approach the next budget time or the next issue with policies that need to be developed. It's recommendations that we hope will be coming to us, but that you'll be working with them about helping them decide what priorities are. And
Sure, I mean, we can be an ear to help decide what priorities are. Ultimately, I think it's
our
your
decision,
responsibility
but
to
we
direct
need
staff.
proposals to come, specific proposals, basically.
I don't think that I'm in a position to
No, not you.
prioritize your
No, I'm just saying
proposals, but
You're suggesting that they get to come up with as proposals to us.
I think, well, you have to knock them down in buckets, I guess. OPEB is a different animal than
Right.
a fixed asset policy.
I understand.
So the OPEB piece, I think, is going to be collaboration in every budget year to sort of figure out what you can carve away at that. It comes up differently in union negotiations. So OPEB, I think, is going to be a discussion item that you're always having and always changing and always looking at. In terms of the other findings in the back of the financial statements, we could sit down with staff, and we sort of already have, about prioritizing those things, and many of them are not new. And I do think having new people in management to take a fresh look at those and repunt those will be good. And our conversations with current management at the tail end of this audit, everyone's been very engaged and very on board and asking questions and taking notes, and we've had way longer meetings than we have had in past audits.
Any other comments from commission? Any further comments from Will?
I don't think so. So the only, I guess, question I had was your concern about the reservation for OPEB. Did you want staff to double check that before we wrap up?
Well, I would like someone to look at it, because I had thought that we had had that discussion and that we were committing that certain amount, and I had expected that we would see it here.
Okay.
Now, it's very possible that we had the discussion, but it was for the next calendar year, or the next, fiscal year. And in my head, it was going to show up here, and it'll show up next year. But I would like to, if we could just take a look at it.
If we could take maybe a small break before this audit is approved, I think we could research
Is that
that pretty
something you
quickly.
can look at really quickly?
I think so.
Well, I mean, I know where the policy is, why I think it's for next year.
Yeah, fund balance.
But I think what's being asked here is that we go through the minutes of the meetings to make sure to see if there wasn't.
When we did it, and
Yeah, because I'm positive, I've read the thing a couple of times. It's in the 13-14 budget document. But you may have been, in the minutes, it may say something a little bit different, that it was moved to have it be effective of June 30, 13, as opposed to 13, 14. That might take a little more time to research the minutes.
Would it have been in the February? I have the minutes on my laptop here. February commission meeting, most likely?
Probably February or March.
That's when we did the,
Yeah, I think it's
probably the
budget workshops.
you were here.
You were here.
And there was multiple budget workshops, there was a couple of them.
Yeah.
And I think it was after that. I think
Right, I thought it was separate from,
it was Will was at one of the budget workshops,
No, it was after
and
that. It
that's
was-
where the proposal,
It was an adjustment to the budget that we made because there was a windfall. And the question was, what were we going to do with that money? And we put some aside for extra health budget, and we put that chunk aside for committed to, and we had a discussion about whether we should put it into something outside, and we weren't ready to do that, but we did a committed fund for the OPEB. And I'm sure it was when there was some unexpected amount of money came to us.
Wasn't it the redevelopment? A payment from the wait, it was a payment from the redevelopment.
it's not my memory,
And something else.
And something else, yes. But they were one-time
Right, they were one-time.
expected
one-time
amounts,
money.
and
You discussed OPEB at the March budget, the March budget workshop, but there was no action.
right.
Wasn't it about $1 million that we?
That was
that
500.
unexpected?
Oh, that we unexpected.
Unexpected.
I think it was, yeah, I have,
So in the, let me see which date this is. At the April 8th commission meeting, action item 8.2 was adopt the policy on OPEB benefits. Action was postponed until May meeting.
but this was an actual commitment of money, and there was a windfall, and I think it was later, like in June or July. I mean, I have it in,
I don't remember that.
you don't think it was that late?
I thought it was that we had, my memory is that Will and Sandy came up with the suggestion that we take $500,000 from our fund balance that was uncommitted to commit to that it had nothing to do with the windfall. It was just a procedure of how we could begin to do that, and that's my memory.
Because when we had that conversation, I don't remember which commissioner it was, but the question was, where did you pull 500 from? And so then the conversation led to, well, should we figure out, should it be a percentage? Should we figure out a better number than just rounding it to 500 every year? I don't recall it going any further than that, though.
Well, then we said to commit it. I mean, we decided to do that.
So maybe the issue here is, in the commission's mind, the time frame was, the month we were having the discussion, but from a accounting perspective, the discussion was talking about this budget for the coming year, or the coming fiscal year, that we were giving a directive. And it's just I think we all agree we made the decision. Maybe in our minds, it was happening instantaneously.
Right, and the decision was part of the budget approval process, and that policy was included in that budget packet. And so I think that, I think you've identified what the issue is. You were taking an action in wherever, either it was May or June, and you thought it's happening now.
Right.
And the way the budget policy reads is it applies to the 13-14
So
budget.
there was an OPEB policy voted on and approved at the June 3rd, 2013 commission meeting. My recollection of that policy, though, was to remain on pay-as-you-go, because we did recommend that you document and vote and approve in your commission meetings your consensus to remain on pay-as-you-go. I don't know that policy includes anything further than that, though. So that would be I guess the one to pull and look at would be the June 3rd, 2013 OPEB policy.
We approved that policy, and in that policy, it said that without requiring any specific amount or percentage, it encouraged
Yes.
putting aside as much as possible. But I recollect a separate conversation where we voted to actually commit
But we did.
money, and I'm not sure what that was then, if it wasn't from the windfall that we got.
It was from the fund balance, my memory is.
Well, at this point, I would like to suggest that we either decide we don't really care and we adopt this audit, or we ask them to come back after researching. I don't think we should take any more commission time on it.
Okay, I'm
Is that
fine
all
with
right?
that.
I was gonna, I mean, I am happy, if you're all in consensus with the 500,000 being committed and you're documenting that in these, I'm happy to make that adjustment to these financial, that's not hard for us to do. But
But we have to have made sure we do it. We have done it before we actually say we've done it.
We did it. Well, okay, where are we, folks? I need some direction here.
I guess it goes back to Will to, with whatever help he needs, to find out what we did and when we did it. And then when an adjusted audit comes back to us, then we can accept it or not. Does that make sense?
this does need to get to the county of Sonoma.
When,
Well, they have the final draft already, but if there is an adjustment to the commitment, I need to tell them.
It'll take me 2 minutes to go get the policy, to go get the budget policy.
Okay.
If it'll just put it to rest right now.
All right, well, while you're gone for your 2 minutes, I will ask, is there any public input onto the audit report? All right, so we'll set that aside for the moment until Bruce gets back. And now we'll go on to the committee reports, starting with the Joint Powers Agreement.
there were 2 Joint Powers Agreement Committee meetings in November. And the committee approved a final version that they are now sending out to the County Board of Supervisors and all of the city councils, asking for their approval. Healdsburg's meeting tonight, and as that statement that I read earlier reflects, Healdsburg, I believe, is in a position where they might reject it with, if the disparity of services left in. It was a 5-to-6 vote. There was actually a tie on whether to include the provision that allowed the disparate service, and then the chair, Mike McGuire, for the county did the tie vote, broke the tie with a vote for allowing the language into the JPA. So that plus the other issue that's going to come back, I think, is apparently the county is fairly insistent that they get 2 representatives on the newly constituted commission, and Santa Rosa potentially, it was felt, might feel if the county was going to get 2, then they should get 2 as well. And the other cities at the table felt like maybe they could live with the county getting 2, but they really didn't think that Santa Rosa should. So we are coming back on January 30th after all of the city councils and the Board of Supervisors have had a chance to discuss and vote on whether they approve the JPA as currently constituted, or the amended JPA, and if they kick it back with a, this is the hill we die on, when then people are going to have to talk about provisions that are not acceptable or that are asking to be put in, or however that looks. Or if everybody decides they like it the way it is, then as of January 30th, we'll have a new JPA and a new commission as of February 1st, which is the date that they currently have in there. So, here's hoping.
I also might add that the thing that made the decision about inequity of service moderately palatable to the communities that were against it was the fact that they're going to, there will be a provision requiring a supermajority of the commission to approve it, and a significant time, they were mentioning something like 24 months worth of funding upfront to be able to do it, so that it was a big hurdle to get over to try to do it. The other thing that I had mentioned at the meeting, I don't think I did publicly, but if they do approve on the 30th, and expect a new commission to meet at the end of February, they're going to be needing to get organized fairly quickly on appointing commissioners.
Well, the idea is if they approve the agreement, then they appoint their commissioner at the same time.
Really?
That is the concept that is being pushed out.
All right.
Right now, as I said, Healdsburg's discussing it. I don't believe there is an appointee being discussed at the Healdsburg City Council tonight. The Board of Supervisors meets December 10th. I don't know quite what they have. But that was sort of the concept was that at the time of approval, they would then select their new commissioner.
I recall a conversation at that meeting about needing to be a window after they approved the JPA that they would advertise and recruit for and find a commissioner. And that's why they extended that out to that March 3rd putative date for seating the new commission.
I
even if
think
it
they
was
left it at February 1st.
They did, but I don't, I thought that was very odd to see that February's first number still in there.
Right now, the
when I
new
really
de-
recalled the conversation saying March 3rd.
And they haven't drawn from the hat about
So-
how many years.
Right. Well, they were going to do that after after the commission is, oh no, they were going to do it in advance. I don't know what they think.
Yeah.
At this point, it's a little blurry about what they are doing, other than, right, the way it stands, the current JPA talks about newly constituted commission as of February 1st, and the discussions have all been that if the county or city council approves the JPA, then they would pick a commissioner at that time. I'm not sure the city councils are aware of that part.
I know when the city of Sonoma discussed this a month ago, there was a recommendation, I think by maybe the city attorney, that they go through the same application process as they do for other commissions within the city. Applicants, interviews, and all of that. It was clear in the discussion that they didn't think that time frame was linked.
Yeah, in the committee discussions, the chairman especially has been linking the two of them together. I'm not sure how much of that link has made its way back to the people actually voting on this thing. So I don't know how it's going to look, but I know that if the JPA passes as it is currently written, and then it says February 1st is the date the new commission takes over, we're done. I mean, I don't think we would have authority to keep going at that point, whether or not they have new people they've appointed.
But
So-
procedurally, if it goes down, if Healdsburg says no,
Then we
and
just-
on January 30th, you will meet and say, this does not fly.
Right,
So
they'll meet
certain
again and-
changes you will
right.
have to make.
And they will, if Healdsburg says, no, we will not pass it unless this change is made, then on the 30th, the Healdsburg rep will come back, everybody will know, Healdsburg said this, and then they'll discuss whether they're willing to make the change, or rather they just all walk away and leave the current JPA in place, which is the other option.
All right. Let's step back for a minute. Do we have an answer from the out of the room?
Yes. So it was part of a resolution that commission meeting 4/8/2013, and the recommended action, adopt a resolution that states the library's intent regarding funding other post-employment retirement benefits OPEB for 2013-14. And when you go back to the resolution, I'll spare you reading the whole thing, but the pertinent part is, be it further resolved that for fiscal year 2013-14, the library will designate $500,000 of its current fund balance for that purpose, and be further resolved. So.
Okay, so it's supposed to be
Good,
there.
well, thank you. Thank you.
And Will, thank you.
Thank you.
Any final comments? Well, I certainly appreciate the tone with which you present things and the clarity, and I appreciate it a lot, so thank you.
We'll keep working with management, and we'll have a couple little just wrap up audit items with you as well, just some signatures that we'll have to collect.
Oh, some signatures. Oh, fun. All right.
In the absence of a director, we'll have to collect a signature from you.
Wait,
Oh, great.
we can't use our interim director?
So do we have to do a motion?
Because they weren't directors during the audit period,
Oh.
I think it's in their best interest to have a commissioner sign them.
Thank you.
I
Thank
move
you.
that we accept the basic financial statements for year ending June 30th, 2013 as presented.
I second.
Did you get that? Okay. Any questions?
Are we jumping to 9.1 here?
I guess they are jumping to 9.1. So Will can go. All right.
Is that okay, that I jumped ahead?
I think we can, it's fine. Any public comment regarding the issue? Any statement from the commission before we vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed? All in favor?
Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I ask if we could have another rearrangement of the agenda potentially? We have a guest in the room who is here for item number 9.4 to discuss the relocation of the commission meetings. And he is from the city of Santa Rosa, Eric, I believe. And it would just be a kindness if we could undertake that item sooner rather than later so he too could depart.
I'm fine with that. Is the commission fine? Okay. Let's go to item 9.4. Let me get down here. Okay, there is a recommended action and a motion. Do we want to discuss it before we hear the motion? This is one that I think you had said you wanted to.
No, not this one. Well, I had a couple of questions. I also have a, well, first the questions, so I want to be sure we've checked it, that there's no conflict with any of the meetings we need to do, including the budget meetings? Is that, am I?
I'm going to get Rebecca up here to
Yeah.
speak to that.
So I did send the preliminary draft commission meeting schedule for 2014, which is on the consent calendar for tonight, to Eric McHenry, who's here, who is coordinating all this and has provided all the information about the Board of Supervisors, or rather the Santa Rosa City Council chambers. And it doesn't appear that there's any conflict right now. Is that correct?
I'm not sure your mic's working. It's very hard to hear.
No. Do I need to repeat all that?
That's good.
I think we heard it.
Okay.
That basically that you feel there's no conflict.
Well,
Is that correct?
I think the question,
Come on now.
Commissioner and members of the commission. Yeah, the question is really not on the first of the Mondays, your scheduled meetings, but on the early budget meetings. We weren't sure when you would want to start if you move forward with this. So I'm not sure we've checked the budget meetings, because those are actually in the next month, I believe. Is that correct?
They start in
And then-
February.
I think we have to double check on those. I'm not sure we checked those. If it was the first Monday of the month, regularly scheduled, those are fine. Special meetings, not sure. Depends when you guys want to start.
Well, and there's one that's
And then
not
the other
first.
question I had was, looking down the road, if this works and we stay there for some length of time, are we committed, do we enter into a commitment for a particular length of time, or is it just every month, kind of, month to month, or what are we doing?
So we'd have to draft up an agreement, right?
Right.
The typical facility use agreement. we would expect that that would be for a number of years. It could also be month to month, but we would expect a number of years because we think you'd want to get on the calendar with firm dates.
And then if there were conflicts of interest with dates in the future, how would that be resolved? Or
The
what's
way it
being
typically works
proposed?
for someone who wants to use our council chambers is that we say, look, you've got the first of the month, first Monday of the month, given with you guys. And any other dates, you'd have to check with the city manager's office who schedules the rooms before picking your dates if you want to be assured you could have the rooms.
Okay.
Right, and the place is not used heavily on non-scheduled dates. We have city council meetings, planning commission, board of public utilities, the school board, but those are all regular meetings. We sometimes, though, as Bruce does here, have long budget outreach meetings, but those also are scheduled based on availability of the facility. And we're prepared to honor the first of the month, first Mondays of the month, for sure.
I know that September is the second Monday of the month. Just,
So we have to,
Right.
Yeah, I did already send him that draft.
Okay.
earlier, so it's under review.
right.
all right. Shall we, can I ask for a motion? Then we can have further discussion.
Sure. I move that the Sonoma County Library Commission approve the proposal to hold commission meetings in Santa Rosa City Council chambers.
Moved by Mary Evelyn. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tom. All right, any further discussion from the commission about this issue? I've heard a rumor that there are enough seats for this expanded commission.
How many seats are there?
Well,
It would be a tight fit. There's 10
so if
mics right now.
there's 10 seats right now.
So if
And
everybody
mics?
gets one, it'll work perfectly.
Well, okay, so we'll have director, the way we've currently been doing it, right? You have the
Right.
director, you have the CFO.
Right.
I mean, there are,
But there's a table where
Right.
that you could have staff sit at in front.
Right, this is
Correct.
going to be an issue wherever we end
Yeah,
up.
right.
Because of the potential expanded
Right.
commission.
At the city council, we occasionally have joint meetings with the school board, for example. And those are occasional, but those meetings, or with the Board of Public Utilities, they squeeze close to twice as many people at the dais. But they share a mic, right? Two people would share a mic. It's tight. I would encourage you to look at it some more for those big, and it depends on if people end up being on the commission as well. The other issue that, again, from our city standpoint, we think it's a great idea. C-Media also, their executive director isn't here, but they like the idea as well. One of the questions that I want to make sure you understand is that for closed sessions, I don't think there's a defined plan on how to handle when you have closed session meetings, right? I understand typically you have them in this room when you have a closed session?
No, we go to the.
Go to a conference room.
We go to a
So
conference
That's a
room.
challenge. Currently, groups who use our chamber are the school board and the city council and our other boards, and they end up have the ability to go into the city manager's office. We're not allowing that anymore because of security reasons and the need to have staff presence. The city manager's office is not just a conference room. Many of you have been in there. It's an office environment, and if there's no city staff there, we're not encouraging any more groups to move into that room at 8 o'clock at night and move in and out again. And so that's one of the challenges, and we've talked about it just briefly. It's up to you guys to tell us what might or might not work for you. One option is if you had your closed sessions after your meeting, then you could have them in the council chamber after the public left. It's a little bit more challenging, of course, but that's something I'd encourage you to think about, your closed session. Or you could have them over here. It's a bit of a walk. It's probably a 7-minute walk from council chambers, but there are some practical challenges with your closed sessions. Again, we're really interested in making this work for you if we can. We can also talk about, is there some other conference room right nearby, but I don't know that there is, that would be open 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, especially if you have your closed sessions after you have your regular meetings.
is there activity that needs to be done at the close of the open session besides clearing the room of people leaving, but are there technical things. I mean, these guys, you know, when we finish here, they have work to do, right?
Yeah, I'm
It-
going to
so-
ask Patty or George might know, in that facility there, is there much to do once you're done? And
Not really, yeah, just closing up downstairs, there's nothing to pick up or move.
What, 5 or 10 minutes and you're out?
5 minutes.
Yeah, so that facility is a great facility for these guys also, so yeah, 5 minutes, they're out. So by the time you clear the room, they'd be out, you'd have it private. That is one option.
Is there a curfew? Is there a cutoff time at which we could not?
You clearly have not watched our council meetings recently.
Our meetings sometimes go until 10:30.
No, there's not.
Okay. I didn't know if your janitors need to go home or somebody needs to lock
No.
up or.
No, there's not.
All right, is there any further question from the commission?
When, if we move forward on this, when are we looking at to start meeting?
I don't know. What?
I think from the city standpoint, if you guys agree to move forward, it'll take us a couple weeks or so to get the necessary agreements in place. We don't know that there's that much to be put in place. When people use our facilities, like if you go to Finley Center or any of our facilities, you typically sign a little thing that says, we release you of liability to this, this, and this. We'd ask for an insurance certificate, which is common. I think those things could happen pretty quickly, although going through our legal department for a formal agreement, I don't know. So I'd say probably a month to be on the long side if you guys move forward with it.
And we're not meeting again until the end of
And Granicus,
January.
and so the other side, excuse me, to add, on the technical side, I think these guys are good to go because they know that chamber better than we do, I would imagine. Yeah.
You're ready to go. It won't take you much to be able to transfer over there?
We're there.
Okay.
Yeah, they're there now.
Okay.
The other thing would be the Granicus system, which is the agenda management postings. That is not critical to have that at day one, but we need some time to train staff on how to use that. That could happen in, it's pretty quick also in a week or so too. So I think the month timeframe is reasonable, I would say.
All right. Is there any public comment on this? Any further comment from the commission? Yes.
So I have a question for Jamie and David or Rebecca. Are there any downsides to this?
Just not being in the library environment.
Right. That's it?
I have one thing I want to add. I apologize. I wasn't
Go ahead.
prepared to talk. I didn't have you get to decide if you want it live streamed over the web, live stream like right now when it's happening, if you want to live stream over the web or over TV or not at all. That's something you'd have to instruct C Media to do. It's flipping a switch. It's no extra cost for going out over our public broadcasting channel live and streamed. Or you could choose, like some of our boards and commissions do, to not have it live streamed, but have it archived, available the next morning. That's a decision you'd have to inform us on your desire.
Can we have a 2-minute delay?
Watched our council meetings, have you? No, nothing allowed.
Did you have a question, Julia?
Well, I have a concern, and that is that we have not discussed this with any outside, with our labs or with, we regularly get accused of making fairly significant changes without discussing it with any of the stakeholders. And although I'm not sure where we hold our meetings is of huge concern to everybody, especially if it is more efficient, money-saving, and we can stream it live, and there isn't a real downside, I also still feel like maybe we should take the time to do the outreach and ask what others think of it before we make the decision, just so we get in the habit of doing that.
I think that's a good point, Julia. I think that would be wise of us to do. I think I would like to put a vote in for live streaming because I think we might actually get more viewers if it's live streamed.
Yes.
Because I think right now, there is like a possible 2-week delay before it gets posted. Is that correct, Rebecca? I know you gave me that information, but I'm fuzzy remembering.
It's typically closer to a week, depending on.
Holidays.
Typically closer to a week, depending on how the platform that we're using to post is functioning at any given time, which is an ongoing problem. And I certainly respect your wanting to bring others into this decision, but I also want to point out that they're not here. I mean, they don't attend these meetings for the most part.
Well, I do realize that, but one of the things we've heard from the labs, and not just Sebastopol, but from several of the labs, is that they don't know when to give us feedback. They
Right.
are waiting for us to ask them things rather than coming up with things to give us feedback, and they want to know how the flow of information can work better. And this seems like one of those things that, although I would imagine everybody would say, hey, great idea, go forward, just the courtesy of asking might go some distance to forming good relationships.
And I do recall, we did talk about doing this like 6 months or so ago before we started having it videotaped, I think. And the public comment I remember where people were concerned about having it outside of the library environment. So it might be a good opportunity for us to sell it in a really positive fashion, so that we don't get that negative kickback. So I understand wanting to get it taken care of, but I agree, Julia, that it would be a good idea. And just before you go sit down, Rebecca, I know it says that it's the total cost except for the staff time, but I just wanted to, because there's, I mean, it's cost us actually more to have it here, according to this.
Yeah, it does.
If we were to have it at the City of Santa Rosa, and that's interesting. It's a good selling point.
Well,
I'm less concerned about talking to the labs about it. I don't think the labs consider or care whether we meet in this room or in another room. From what I've heard, labs have said, why don't you come to our library? But we're not considering that at the moment. So if we meet in this room or another room, I don't think the labs care much about that.
I'm in sort of a quandary from the standpoint of we have a motion on the floor that's been moved and seconded, and we also have an attitude of maybe tabling until we have time for input. So I'm not sure exactly how we proceed. And in that case, the vote would probably happen at the late January meeting is when we would.
If you wanted to take it to all the labs, it would probably take a couple of months to do that and then come back.
It strikes me this is a housekeeping issue. It's not I don't think it's anything the labs know or care about.
We have a lab member here. Let's ask her.
If I may just weigh in one more time.
You'd be more comfortable in a different room.
I would agree. I doubt very much with the lab. Anybody coming from the lab, whether it's Santa Rosa or wherever, the distance coming here or coming to Santa Rosa Council is nothing. I mean, it's a walk. So it's not like you're going from one end to the other and saying, well, okay, we're going to go all the way to the north end of Santa Rosa or all the way to the south end, whatever. So I can't imagine that that's going to make a difference. I'm curious as to why you want to make the move since you're asking.
Go ahead.
As we've seen for the past 3-4 years now, this room is sorely equipped as far as an AV setup. You hear the buzz regularly. We've been a little bit tonight. It's actually been a little better last couple meetings, but there have been times when people want to tear their ears off. It's not going to get any better unless we invest quite heavily in this room. $25,000 to $30,000 in a microphone setup to bring it up to par. And that's counting what we have now as far as mics. Having 12 microphones or 12 speakers in this room is going to be highly challenging. Just 10. Carrie, you've all heard Carrie talk. She wanted to be here tonight because this is kind of her. Oh, good. She's home with tonsillitis, I think. But the staff time and toil in getting this room to a subpar level is the biggest reason why, if there's an opportunity to move it into a room that actually is designed for this, then we really should take it up on it. And that's the biggest reason.
So I have a suggestion, which was when we made the initial decision to move away from just manual handwritten minutes to actually using the filming and going in that was new, we hadn't done it before, and I think we said, let's try it for 6 months and then pause and evaluate, do we want to continue or not? And I'm a huge believer in pilot things if you can. So if the city of Santa Rosa is open to it, I'd like for us to move forward with we're going to do a 6-month pilot and see how it works from a technical perspective as well as a political, and then do we get any negative repercussions from our, our patrons or constituents that there's, and then go forward. So, of course, that would mean the city would have to agree for us to do a shorter term pilot with the understanding that it's not likely that we're going to want to not move forward, but that we're not obligated beyond that, because we want to make sure that we want to test the waters. I think that was the approach we took when we moved into using the film, and I think it's worked well. We determined, yes, this is a good approach, but now we're saying, well, it's a good approach, but let's make it better. So
you're proposing an amendment to the motion?
I'm proposing that we, yes, slightly amend it to say that we do this, we implement it for a 6-month pilot, and then determine at that time if we want to continue.
Okay, so there is a motion, there is a movement, a motion to amend the motion to say, I move that the Sonoma County Library Commission approve the proposal to hold commission meetings in the Santa Rosa City Council chambers for a 6-month pilot period. Is that, got a second?
Sure.
That's seconded by Mary Evelyn. Did you get that? All right, so now we're ready to call the question. All those in favor in the motion as amended?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? There being no opposition.
One question now, it will start in January, is that so?
I think so.
Our next meeting is January 30th.
Right.
Is that sufficient time for everything to get put in place?
Yeah, with your vote,
I
yeah,
think it's the
we'll start to
27th.
work toward that. I'll communicate with. So I think the other question we need to answer too is that do you want live streamed, and also do you want televised? Those are two separate things.
Yeah, definitely live stream.
And televised?
Let's not televise. Let's just do live stream.
Let's just do live stream.
That's
It would only be televised in Santa Rosa, right?
No.
Yeah.
Well,
Can we construct mutual agreements with other community media centers and stream it in Petaluma at the same time, for instance?
What was the question?
Don't tell me you can't hear in your headset. Is there a possibility of constructing an agreement with, say, the Petaluma?
In Santa Rosa, and we have no means of actually duplicating as we do here. I mean, I'm not dissing the move, but it would only be in Santa Rosa. It would be on Grandfish. You can see it live everywhere.
Right. Okay.
If it was being televised live, then if you had AT&T Uverse, you could get it in other places. But I guess one of the options is to televise it live. I mean, it will definitely replay on the Santa Rosa Comcast system. But I think those were all options, I believe, that were essentially.
so just in interest of time, I think we got your general direction. We'll start moving ahead, and perhaps you guys tell us at the last minute whether it's televised or not. We can start working to get the agreement in place for you guys.
Okay, I would prefer that it not be televised personally, but. All right, moving back to the agenda. This is the, thank you very much. Now we'll move on to the Ad hoc Revenue Committee report. I have a report to make is that I have asked, well, Mary Evelyn has resigned from that committee, and I have asked Julia to take her place. So that committee membership has changed. And you have had, hey, we have a 2-minute delay. All right, and so, and you folks haven't met, right? But you,
Correct.
go ahead, but you have some proposals or thoughts?
Right, we haven't been able to get a meeting date together, but we do plan to try to meet in the next week or so and meet with Bruce. One of our plans is to sit down with him and look at the budget proposal and come up with some suggestions or some thoughts for the commission on how we can move forward with some of our priorities.
All right, and then also, I would like to ask this committee to take on the task of beginning to look at the possibilities of a tax election and work with David. Yes.
So I've been contacted by Mr. Greenberg, who's spoken at our meeting a couple of times, and he is anxious and setting up a structure. I don't know exactly what he wants to do, but he talked to me for quite a long time about getting a measure on the ballot to either property parcel tax or a sales tax or something, and he's got a lot of ideas and a lot of energy, which I think needs to be hopefully corralled a little bit, and then with that we can. So he's very interested in moving forward with that. I'm trying to get a political consultant to donate a little bit of time to talk to us in the beginning about putting together a game plan, what kind of polling we might actually need. And I believe that Kim Tucker from the Law Library is also interested in participating in such an event, and maybe to the benefit of the Law Library as well. And there's a meeting now with David and her and I next week. Yes?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, my feeling is it'd be great for, and I don't know, David has spoken to me a bit about this, but where we can step and where we can't step as a public entity and whatever, but I think it's good to have a group of people, and now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, half and half, or whatever, to begin to specifically look at this and get started in what steps
Well, I
could
guess
be taken.
part of my point is that we do need to jump on it and go with it, because if we don't, I think others will, and we won't have any influence or control, and that can blow up.
Right. David, do you have anything to add to this?
I think you're exactly right, that we need to get together with the folks in the community who have the energy and passion and see how we can work together and what comes of it, because it's an opportunity to seize. And there's clearly a need. We can demonstrate it. We can demonstrate what kind of services we can provide if we did raise revenues. I think the people in this community are hungry for the opportunity, so let's go.
Okay, so are you, all right. Moving on to 523, ad hoc for the committee for the search for the director. I think we really don't have anything to add except what's already on the agenda, right? Okay. Any public comment on committee reports? Moving on to commissioner comments, major information and lab activities. Let's start on this end of the table.
I went to the Cloverdale lab. They have the roof's been repaired. They're very excited about that. The city came up with some money to do the roof repair, so they won't have a leak anymore. And I'm trying to remember, I didn't bring my notes. And they're all good. I told them about the JPA. They were interested. They wrap up in like an hour. They're amazing. They're very efficient in their meetings, and I don't have anything else to report.
Well, we heard about the Healdsburg lab has gone in force tonight to the city council meeting. We'll find out. Stay tuned. Details at 11.
News at 11.
The other thing is, and it comes up a little bit later, is I had some conversations with John Hout, who was the librarian at the wine library, and that's going to come up a little bit later also in your report. He's starting to work with the real or imagined wine museum, which may or may not happen in downtown Santa Rosa.
All right, a virtual museum. All right, Petaluma, the redesigned desk is moving along. They worked on it over the Thanksgiving holiday also. Phase 2 is done and Phase 3 is moving along. The Friends are ecstatic. They had their highest sale at their latest sale of $6,026, and they are, as always, wonderful. And just on a personal note, I was in the Oakland airport flying to Portland, and I got into overdrive and downloaded an audiobook that I was able to, from our library, that I was able to listen to on the drive home, and I deeply appreciated that we have audiobooks and that I can get them from almost anywhere. So that's that.
The Santa Rosa Lab met on Wednesday, November 20th, and the lab has put together a handbook, basically a variation of the handbook that the Sebastopol Lab had put together, and so that was distributed for feedback as well. So also we had a report on the fall book sale that the Friends did, which, apparently, although the numbers, they netted 15,000, which sounds like a lot of money, is actually substantially less. The gross was like 27,300, but they have substantial costs in putting it on. And so they're going to kind of regroup to identify, what might need to change to bring it back up to the amount that they've generated in the past. There will be, in the Forum Room, Holiday Book Fair, December 6th from 10 to 5, and then December 7th, which is so it's a Friday, Saturday from 10 to 4. So that'll be here. So that's what's going on there. And then we talked about, I asked for and got good comments from the lab as to what would be important in a director, as we've been seeking input from all the different constituents. Some of the key items mentioned were knowledge of library, communication skills, successful in relationships, good with handling finances, definitely request, which of course we will do, a thorough background check. Also leadership in technology and making sure that the individual comes from a complex system, a multi-branch system, recognizing the complexity of our system. Want to have a people person, and then someone who will reach out to the labs, include the labs, and leverage the labs and utilize them as a resource. So that was discussed. I'm not going to go through everything. We had updates from the branch managers, but one other comment which actually was brought up by the Santa Rosa Lab chair, who is here, was the idea of doing library tours, particularly focused on some of the families, some of the Hispanic families, to give maybe a knowledge about what's there and a higher comfort level, and doing more community outreach and trying to get the entire families to come and see what resources are here. That seems like a really great idea. Some of the highlights of the meeting.
The Roanoke Park Toddy Library did not meet this month, so I'll report out in January, I believe.
So Sebastopol is meeting Wednesday, and I'll just mention that they are having, the Friends of Sebastopol Library are having their children's book sale later this week, which is a really good opportunity to pick up some gifts for kids for Christmas and Hanukkah. I had the pleasure of going to Mari Barsky's Friends of the Library sponsored retirement luncheon on Sunday. It was delightful. And I think she has mixed feelings, but she's not going to not retire. So we are sad about that. A high point for Guerneville last month was that they changed their bylaws so that they now read that they have at least one youth member instead of just one member. And so you'll see later on the agenda, we have 3 youth members to approve a point for the Guerneville Library Advisory Board. And Guerneville is also having a book sale later this week.
The Sonoma Friends had their book sale about 2 weeks ago and raised about $11,500. And as is our practice, the Friends and the lab jointly have a Christmas party to which you are all invited next Thursday, the 12th at 4:30.
At the library?
Yeah.
I also might add that I was warmly invited to meet with the branch managers at my request, and they didn't deny my request, let's put it that way. Basically, what I wanted to speak to them about, and I also would like to speak to you folks about, is that as it's come up, it's looking like there's some question about who and when the new commission is going to be appointed. And aside from the fact that I would love for all of us to be reappointed by our cities, if any of you are thinking that you may not want to be reappointed by your city, it would be helpful to begin thinking about who in your city is an active and a vibrant library person who could take on this job, and begin taking them out to coffee and teasing them with all the joys and delights of serving on the commission.
Maybe just stay away from it.
Wine might be a good idea also, but in any event, I think it's important that people be thinking to the future of the commission and who gets appointed, and that there might be, that's what I spoke with the branch managers about also.
I think that's an interesting point, but don't we also, some cities may choose to have elected officials that they will appoint.
They may, yes.
I mean, so
That's an
still
option
on
that's
the
open.
table.
It's still
at their
open.
discretion.
It's at their discretion. My sense is that it might be nice for them to have an alternative so that they don't feel that that's the default they have to go to. So that's all for commission comments. We're now at the approving the minutes. Oh man, this is taking a while. Let's click through this. We have 2 sets of minutes to approve, is that correct? Let's go with the minutes for the November 6th meeting. Do we have any motion to or changes to those before we move to approve? I am waiting for a motion.
Move to approve the November 6th minutes.
All right, it's been moved by Julia,
I'll second it.
seconded by Paul. All those in favor? Aye. And just before we get to the 6th, the special study session. I would like to thank staff and commission for the work that went into that meeting. I know that there was a lot of time and effort to make that happen, and I really valued that we had it, and I want to thank you. All right?
Move to approve the minutes for November 18th.
Moved by Julia.
Second.
Seconded by Helena. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next, consent calendar. Yes,
I request that item 8.2, approval of the holiday schedule, be removed from the consent calendar and moved to the action agenda.
okay. That, any member can request that that be done. So other than that, anything about the consent calendar? All right. Let's move on to the action items, and let's start with the calendar. Go ahead.
I asked that it be moved because I understand that the staff would prefer Saturday closures to a Tuesday closure, but I don't think, in my mind, that that just ends the conversation. And again, I think this is one of the things that we should be checking with our lab before we make the decision, and checking with the public and doing outreach, because the hours we are open is very important. And I have heard from, not only here in the commission meeting, but on other occasions as well, people ask why we have to close on Saturday and why we can't do it another day. And I think we need to think about balancing the needs of our employees with the needs of the public we serve. And we're not talking about not giving them a 3-day weekend. It's a question of where it falls. And in this case, I think the public need may be greater to be able to come on a Saturday when the kids are available, et cetera, than the need of our employees to have a 3-day weekend that includes a Saturday. And part of my consideration, and I thought about this a lot before calling Tim today and telling him I was going to do this, part of my consideration is, if we were open Mondays, if we didn't have a Monday closure, this wouldn't even be an issue. We would just be closed on Monday, and we would be open on Saturdays. The normal schedule used to have an opening on Saturday, and so at some point we hope to get back to. But in the meantime, 3 days in a row off that include an entire weekend, maybe more than the public is ready. I mean, I understand the public's point of view, and in this case, I think I would like to have more conversation before we say no to them, to the public.
I agree.
I agree also.
Yeah, I hear more complaints about that than I do even about the Monday closing. People, they sort of accepted that happens, but why 3 days in a row? People are really mad at that.
I have a question. If we were to change this from Saturdays to Tuesdays, is that a issue that would have to go before the union?
I think so.
Okay, so there would even be that issue.
Yes. There's also the issue that you don't meet again until January 27th, which is after the first holiday in 2014. So,
Martin Luther King Day.
yeah.
Well, but when do we meet again?
We meet January 27th.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, and the 20th is, right. But we could approve just that Saturday and come back for the rest of the schedule. Is that not correct?
You could, but then you'd be talking on January 27th about holidays that fall in February, March, and that would not give us a whole lot of time to discuss any issues with the union.
But if we sent direction now to do the meet and confer with the union that is necessary
Well, but
by the 20th.
we can't
27th.
meet and confer with the union I don't think, until we have decided that we wanted to change it.
I agree, right.
I mean, we've already asked them through the union that, and they have already said that for the most part, people want to stay with Saturdays. So until we have the input from the labs and the public, and make a change of proposal, then we're,
So does our agreement with the union specify the specific holiday days that's laid out? Or does it specify, these are the holidays we celebrate? What's the language in our agreements?
It lists each holiday
And it
specifically.
says- And it says, okay, so for Martin Luther King, the holiday is Monday, and we'll be closed on Saturday. That's what it says?
Patrick, do you recall?
What does it
And I don't have my copy.
It's unlikely that it says that. I think what would be at issue would be a change in working conditions that would trigger certain
I mean, if
language in
that's-
the MOU.
If we opened on Mondays, say, if we open on Mondays, and Mondays are regular working days, and then, a holiday falls on a Monday, then we'd be closed on the Monday. We wouldn't be open and we'd be open on the Saturday, right?
Right.
Does that require us to go back to the union? Say we said, we found $1 million, and we're gonna open on Mondays. I mean, do we have to negotiate with the union that we're gonna be open on Mondays? And I'm really just trying to
No.
Figure out the
understand.
hypothetical here.
I think that it would be the commission's right to determine when you want to be open to the public, and then after that decision is made, a conversation would have to be had with the union regarding the change in working conditions. and
It's a
schedule.
meet and confer, not necessarily a negotiated item, is that right? I mean, we have to let them know and talk to them about it,
Yes.
but they don't necessarily get to veto it if we decide to do
It
it.
would be a meet and confer over the impact of the decision.
Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So they don't have the right to say, no, you can't do it. That our employees won't work on Tuesday, won't work on Saturday.
No.
okay. We are, it seems feasible. This is just a middle ground I'm coming up with, is that we approve the calendar through February. With the current, that would be including continuing the status quo for at least 2 more Saturdays. And then that gives us enough time to have met with labs and have input. And then at our February meeting, we can adopt the rest of the calendar with whatever change we come up with. Are people understanding? So that,
There are only 5 Saturdays in the year.
Actually, 4, I think.
5, I think, that we change.
Okay. The Veterans Day.
President's Day.
Veterans Day is going to be kind of that open on Saturday, closed Sunday, closed Monday, closed Tuesday, assuming we're still closed on Mondays, right? Because of it falling on a Tuesday.
yeah, Veterans Day by law has to be on the November 11th.
Right, so that one ends up being kind of that way in any case.
Could I ask, when we used to be open on Mondays, did we close on Sundays when there was a holiday on a Monday?
No.
So it was just the one holiday, one day?
Yes.
Monday. Because, when you look at this, it's just like, oh my gosh, we are closed so many days.
Yeah.
It's really kind of hard to swallow.
There would be no fewer days closed if you changed it to Tuesday.
Right. It's just a shift.
You still close Sunday?
The Sundays, only
on
one
Sunday.
library is open on Sundays.
Right.
But does it get closed? Would it get closed?
That would be up for the commission to decide.
The other option that was raised by a staff member on our branch tours was stay open on Saturdays and let staff work and get a comp day that they could take at some other time. That comes with the same cost, but it spreads it out over time. I don't know how it would cost out exactly, but I'm specifically not looking over at Bruce right now.
So I'm not sure, could you?
It would be like a floating day for the staff. They could take it some other time when it didn't.
Right, they earn a comp
Bruce
day.
is
They earn a
grabbing
day
his
of
mic.
compensated time that they could take at their own, discretion, basically.
But then you would require those people to work on Saturday?
No, you could,
Just volunteer?
I think he was proposing to be by volunteer and that we would sub out any hours that we couldn't get staff to volunteer for. I mean, it would be tremendously expensive,
Yeah.
but we'd stay open on Saturday.
Or we could just change the closure to Tuesday and be open on Saturday. And we don't have to sub out a lot of people that way.
Right.
I'm seeing are there some comments that want to come from here?
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, so how do we want to proceed, Commission?
I like your proposal of approving now, through February or something, because it seems like there's a desire potentially to change it, but we don't have time. I mean, unless we make a decision right now, we're not going to be meeting again before the first holiday. And if the goal is to get input from others, we're not getting input tonight.
No, but I guess I would, instead of approving all the way through February, why can't we just approve through the end of January? And that takes us to our next meeting. And if we need to do another short approval there, we can, but.
I think Jamie had a good point, though. I mean, I think it's hard for them to plan. I mean, they need to
Okay.
plan
I
to be
understand.
closed that day.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, we're not meeting till January 30th. And the next.
27th.
27th, but that still doesn't leave
Sorry.
enough time
And
before
that may be our
the
last
items fall due.
Right.
so.
And if there's a holiday, mid-February, I think we need to.
Yeah, by the end of January, we would already have the posters printed and out announcing that we are going to be closed Saturday, February
So
15th.
I think your proposal is a good one.
Okay, so there's
May I just interject one thought?
Yes.
And, call me crazy, but you would be looking at implementing this on the one holiday of the year that's named for a labor leader who is a Latino in a county where we have labor issues and strife in our Latino community. And it's just something to consider, is how would that be perceived that, of course we accommodated, President's Day, but came down to Cesar, then we were going to say work anyway.
I think Cesar Chavez would like the libraries open myself.
I think Cesar Chavez would stand up for whatever his workers wanted. That's what I think.
All right, not wanting to put our minds into Cesar Chavez at the moment. I think that I appreciate what you're saying, David, but I still think we're still observing Cesar Chavez Day, except that our employees might not be happy with it. But I would think that we've got a motion essentially saying to approve the calendar through President's Day.
I'll second that.
All right? I didn't know that I could move, but
No, Susan moved.
all right, now we have public comment, I believe.
So I just want to say that I think staff comment about this was pretty overwhelmingly negative. So I would urge you to consider that. Also, if you're considering just a partial approval of this calendar, I think that makes it difficult for staff to plan. I've already had a lot of requests for the draft calendar from staff because I know they're looking, especially right now with short staffing, 3 months, 6 months, even a year out for planning their vacations and et cetera. And I think approving it just for a month makes it really difficult on staff. I really appreciate the spirit in which you're looking at this, which is to make the library open for the public more often, which I think is what we all want. But I think this places a burden on staff.
So you think it would be better if we just approved Tuesdays instead of Saturdays tonight?
I think you should approve.
Easier for staff?
My thought is that the calendar as written should be approved.
But I don't think we want to do that.
Okay.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, let me just finish what I'm saying. with the caveat that you are looking at ways to make the library be open to the public more. I mean, we're looking at Mondays, we're looking at ways to reopen for more hours. So I think this doesn't quite address it, and I think this is going to make things unnecessarily challenging in an already difficult environment for staff. So that's my piece.
All right.
There's a motion and it's been seconded.
There's a motion, and it has been seconded, about approving the calendar through February.
Could I hear from the two directors? What do you think? You're the ones that have to live with the staff on this, not us.
No, we have to live with it too, but.
Yeah, we have to live with the public on it, so what do you think?
We all have to live with the public, first I would say. And that's very true for the staff on a day-to-day basis. We interact with the public every day. I do know that there was an overwhelmingly negative response just to the poll being taken, and it was kind of astonishing to me, actually, how negative the response was, given that it's just one day off versus another day off. But this is a staff that's been working every Saturday.
Exactly.
For a number of years on a Tuesday through Saturday schedule. They don't get Saturdays off to go to their Little League games for their kids. I can't personally imagine not having had a Saturday off with my family for a number of years. And so when this time comes up, this is a true holiday. This is like, oh yeah, I get a holiday. I don't get a weekday off when my kids are in school, back in school. I actually get to be with my family. So on behalf of the staff, I would say pretty firmly that I would go with the schedule as written and work towards passing a tax measure so we can open our libraries the amount of time that the public deserves. That's what I think. I'm sorry to speak with passion, but sometimes I do.
Jamie,
So,
anything to add?
Could I just ask though, but if we go back to being open on Mondays, we wouldn't be closed on Saturdays, and so
Right, that would take care of the
same
problem.
situation would happen.
That would cure the problem.
Well, how does that cure though, if they're
Well, it cures the
unhappy
Monday
about-
issue because the holidays tend to fall on Mondays.
Right, I understand that
But we'd
part,
still
but
be open
it doesn't
Saturday.
cure the Saturday issue that you're
We'd be
talking
open
about,
Saturday.
that
Yeah.
staff is feeling.
We're only closed those Saturdays because the staff are entitled to a holiday,
But
and the
what
holiday
she's-
falls on.
She's saying is the staff still wouldn't get Saturdays off.
Oh, many of them would. If
Yes.
we went to a Monday through Saturday schedule, then we'd be back at, people would rotate their Saturdays or
But if
have.
we were
Right.
fully staffed, I'm not, anyway, I'm not.
We
sure
have
that
to be
it's
adequately
immediate
staffed
that
first
Saturday
before we
problem.
consider opening on Mondays, right? So.
I'm the person, we haven't taken the vote yet, and there's still a vote to move the schedule through February. Interestingly enough, even though I made the proposal, I will probably be voting against it, because I too agree that, this is my personal perspective, but I believe that our staff needs to be respected in this particular issue. They have spoken, we asked for their opinion, they spoke it, and perhaps the mistake was not asking for the opinion from other people before, but I would be, personally, I feel we need to stay with this calendar overall. I just proposed the other one as a compromise, but I will probably vote against it.
And I have to agree. I think the staff has worked quite hard, and it's a lot of the burden, like it was pointed out, they are with the public all the time. And this is, it's only 5 Saturdays, and I think for the goodwill of myself as a commissioner, I'm on the side of the staff. Not that I'm dividing anybody on this, I'm just saying, I think from what I just heard, from what Rebecca and Jamie and David said, I think to change this just for a couple, months, and then to try to go back and vote on it again, there may be a new commission, we don't know. And I agree with Tim. I would vote against changing this calendar and keeping it the way it is.
And my concern, again, what I started out with is, this is a conversation that we need to have with not just staff. We've pulled them and we've found out what their position is. We haven't given the public a chance to weigh in. I mean, we've heard people who will get upset about it, and then we know that there's negative. We don't know, if presented with the question, what kind of feedback we're going to get. And I think it is worth having the conversation with the public before we make the decision, which is why I suggested we just approve, part of it and then go to the labs and talk to them about it. They may say, yes, when we talk to them about it and when the whole thing is talked about and branch managers say, well, our staff needs the Saturdays at that. I mean, it may be we end up voting on this calendar, this schedule, and it stays on this schedule. But my concern is that we have, on multiple occasions, made decisions that directly affect the public in a large way without consulting them, and we've been told, don't do that. And so I'm saying this is one of those occasions that maybe we need to chat with the public before we make the decision. We chatted with the staff, and we got their opinion, and it's very clear, and we're not discounting their opinion, but I believe the public is entitled to make their opinion known as well. It may be the same as the staff's.
Well, I just want to point out that we did have the same schedule last year. So we could approve the schedule again and go to our labs and ask, have a survey of the public, as we are also working on this other
We've already approved
project.
it, then what's the point of asking them?
Well, there's next year.
Yeah, this is the
2015.
following year, because this is
But-
going to keep on until we.
Well, the other thing that I think is, that I think we are working our way through as a commission over the past few years is involving the public in our decisions, and I agree thoroughly and completely with that. This was on our agenda, and it was on our agenda at the last meeting, and that's the reason that it's on the consent calendar now. Now, we haven't formally asked for input on it, but it is a part of our public.
Was it?
It was open to public comment at the last meeting.
Was it one of the items we sent when we gave our summary to the lab?
I don't believe it was in the lab report. It wasn't. All right. So is there any further input from any of the commissioners? Any public input?
I'll probably keep still, but I won't. I wouldn't touch changing hours with a 10-foot pole. I mean, that's been the thing that the public has been the most concerned about. And you've already got JPA coming up in February, whatever their changes are going to be, they're going to be, and they will be making changes, right?
Who knows?
We're assuming.
It's pretty
Or
definite.
there will be new commission members, whatever, there will be some changes. I wouldn't touch hours unless you absolutely have to, with a 10-foot pole.
Okay, thank you. There is a motion on the floor to approve this calendar through February. All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Okay, so that, did you vote?
I didn't.
Okay. Are you abstaining?
Well, are we going to have another motion then?
We're going to have
I
a
mean-
motion to approve the calendar as presented.
Okay. I will vote no on the short one and vote yes on the.
Okay, so there's two no's, there's two yeses on the amendment on the motion to approve only through February. And they were Arnold and, Julia and Mary Evelyn. I don't need to go to last names. And the rest of the commission voted no on that. Now I would invite a motion to approve the calendar as it is.
So moved.
It was moved by Tom to approve the calendar.
I'll second.
Paul seconded. Any further discussion? All right, let's call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the calendar as presented? Aye.
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 All opposed?
Nay.
Did you get that reverse? All right.
I would like to suggest that we do have this discussion with our labs.
Yes.
Well, I am planning to send anybody who asks me about the Saturday hours to Tim and let him explain why we,
Feel free.
I'm forwarding those
But
emails.
This also might be a good opportunity for the labs to try to get, solicit opinions from their community public, which is what Library Advisory Board should be doing.
Wait, but we didn't ask them in advance of the vote, and we go to them now and say, we just voted on the 2014 calendar.
Right, but Julia, it's not a done deal, because if we don't have
Of
Monday.
course, it's a done deal.
If the library's still closed on Mondays for the next 2 years, we still have this problem. We still have this issue. So it's not like it's the end of a discussion.
It's interesting to me that we almost always have unanimous votes. This is one of the ones that we're
Well,
not.
again, my position isn't that we shouldn't have Saturday
I
classes.
know.
My position is
I-
that we should talk to the public about it before we do it.
Right.
Well, I guess I would just ask after the vote's taken, that this was the same calendar we had last year. Was there any public outcry about it last year?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well,
Yes.
that answers my question.
Yes.
But,
That's why the Tuesday option came up as an option.
gotcha.
Okay, now
I
we
would-
get to move on to the.
Can we,
Yes.
next, since this is going to come up again next year, perhaps we can put the staff calendar or the closure calendar earlier in the year on our calendar and agenda to give us time to go to the labs and talk to it?
Yes,
So maybe
that's a
do it
logical-
in August or September, rather than waiting until November.
Particularly since 3 of the Saturdays are in the very beginning of the year. I mean, that's part of the problem.
Right.
You know, you get one, and then 3 weeks later, you have another one, and
Okay. Does anybody need a break?
power through.
Power through. Okay, library director. Oh, Tom,
No, I just got to stand up.
okay.
Keep talking.
All right. Approval of the director job description and salary. There are 2 documents for this. We've already approved the audit.
I have a couple of suggestions for kind of late entries for the job description. Given all of the requirements that are placed on public agencies like OPEB and the GASB stuff, I would feel more comfortable if under knowledge, it said all aspects of public library administration, not just library administration, but public library administration, and includes in that, in the other bullet points, additional things specifically about government and public
Which page is that on?
agencies. Page 3 of the job description. For instance, where it says organizational, administrative management of public sector, just to make it really clear, because there is a difference between a private library and what they're required to do and a public library and all the things that, public collective bargaining with, for a public agency is a little bit different, I think, than
Well,
for a private agency.
Under the minimum qualifications, it does call for 10 years' experience of increasing level of responsibility in a public library and/or public agency, at least 6 of which shall have been in administrative positions. So the public library knowledge is called out in the MQs. And then the knowledge
Why
of...
can't we also add it into
Yeah.
knowledge of all aspects of public library administration? I don't know that that would,
And where would you want to put that?
Under knowledge of...
under knowledge, where it says
I put the
all-
word public, but you had other things.
I could give you some additional verbiage right after the meeting if you want, just to spell out more specifically public things, because there's so much more I think you have to do for public agencies and things that you have to be aware of and,
But I think technically we need to approve it as
okay, as written.
written.
Okay, so
I mean, we
The
did
first
talk.
sentence would be all aspects of public library administration. Is that okay?
Yeah. That seems fine.
So knowledge of all aspects. How about state and federal laws governing the administration and management of a public library? So that would be a good knowledge, have knowledge of state and federal laws governing the administration and management of a public library.
I think these are all redundant.
No, but it's really important that they're clear, that these are things that we run into all the time in a public agency. You know, how you deal,
I think David's point is well taken, that we're requiring 10 years of public agency work. So, I mean, if you're requiring that, if somebody made it through 10 years as a public agency without acquiring the knowledge of what they're required to do in a public agency, I don't think we want to hire them anyway.
And we do call out knowledge of pertinent state and federal laws and regulations, which should cover anything that you might put into actual verbiage. Right? Pertinent?
well,
I don't mean to be impertinent, but
yeah, no.
I've been several times tonight, so.
All right, if you just, in the first sentence, put all aspects of public
Yeah.
library administration, I could be happy with that.
All right, so there's an added word, public library, on page 3, line 5.
I had a question about the salary range.
Oh, did you?
I
Yeah.
did.
I did too.
I have a couple of questions about the salary,
Why don't you
too.
go ahead then?
My question is first, this has become public knowledge. Has anybody from staff or any place, have we had any public comment or information about this since it's been posted?
Not that I know of.
Okay, all right, that was my question. Julia?
Hold on a second, let me just, I'm sorry.
And I have, excuse me if I just interrupt for a second, this is a text message. Hillsburg Council will send a strong letter, local funding option is a deal breaker.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Okay. We love Hillsburg. Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
My question about the salary is, I know that these were agreed on libraries between.
Yeah, this is the group for comps for,
Yeah, no,
for the
I
whole
understand.
class and comp study.
But these communities are, some of these communities are much more expensive. And salaries in those communities tend to be higher paid than here in our Sonoma County. So it does seem high.
The high and low were cut out.
But I understand, but
Okay.
still, well, you know, San Francisco is pretty high end to be
Got cut.
considered.
That one's
Start with
cut.
that. San Francisco got tossed.
And so
I
does
see what you're
Stockton.
saying. I'm sorry,
We
okay.
threw out San Francisco and we threw out Stockton.
And what about Oakland? I mean, that's still pretty high.
Oakland's just a tough place to be a director. They have to pay that person a lot.
My question was, if we're aiming for the 80%, it says it's the intent and recommendation that we not bring in an individual at greater than 80% of the spread. Why are we topping it out then at 16,305? Why don't we top out at 155?
What we attempted to do there is establish an ongoing salary range, not just for recruitment purposes. Yes, the intent is that for somebody starting new at the library, we would not bring them in above 80% of the range. But this would be an established salary range, which the commission at some future date, you know, as they meet with the director, and if they choose to give a merit increase or whatever, this is the range that would be, this is the earning potential that that individual could have, okay? Not just when they started with the library, but also ongoing. And in terms of the comparator agencies, yes, it is more expensive, San Francisco, Oakland, the South Bay. But you also need to be thinking about where are you going to be pulling from in terms of candidates. Ideally, maybe, yes, we could get somebody in at the lower end of the range, but it's hard to say.
Is this 12.5 that we have here, is that what we were paying Sandy Cooper?
Basically, approximately, yes.
And that's what we would start with?
No,
No,
no.
we'd start with the
10.
the 10.
Well, again, it would be the commission's decision. The range,
Right.
Yeah, normally, when you have a range, right, it's, at least in my experience in banking, you have a range for a position, and if you're bringing in someone with substantial experience, you're probably bringing them in on the higher end of the range, but you're not bringing them in at the top of the range, because then there's nowhere for them to go. Then if you want to give them a merit increase, or there's nowhere to go.
And that's a little different for a private agency than a public agency. I mean, I don't think you necessarily, you can negotiate the contract to start them off higher than the lower end of the range, but generally speaking, people come in at in a public agency at the
well,
the lower
except
end
in these
the
kind of
range.
positions.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah, that surprises me.
In a public agency?
I mean,
I don't think that's
think that's true for an experienced individual.
well,
Can I?
go ahead. I was going to make some comments. First of all, this is a management position. It's not governed by the MOU or anything, which does have very clear rules about, what you bring someone in at, where you place them, that kind of thing. Technically, this is entirely at the discretion of the commission. I mean, you don't even need a range. You can just pick a number out of the air and pay the individual that, okay? What we were attempting to do is try to establish some relativity here with other agencies and that kind of thing. The other thing, in the comparator agencies, the salaries listed there are the top of their ranges. Now, that top of the range may be a single incumbent salary, but it represents the maximum earning potential for a director with that agency. And that's really what ours is attempting to represent here. This is the maximum earning potential, but it's not saying that we would bring someone in all the way up at the top. We might bring them in at the very bottom, but we would then say to the individual, this is your potential, depending on how you do.
And how does this compare to what the position range was or salary was for Director Cooper? Because we're going to have to, staff is going to look
There
at
was
this.
no
and say,
range.
what-
It wasn't a range.
So what was she getting paid? It was just a flat salary rate?
Mm-hmm.
And what was it?
It was
It's
12.5.
12.5.
12.5.
Which is what per year?
150.
About 150.
Okay, so we are saying that we're giving somebody the option to earn 10,000 more than we had the position valued at before. Is that right?
Right, and she had been in at that rate of pay for a number of
Right.
years.
I'm,
right.
I'm just thinking, we're broke and we're going to have to, we just finished our contract with, union negotiations, but we still have to justify what we're offering. So I'm just trying to put it into
So
a perspective.
and how many years was she in that position, and that's what she was brought in at?
No, that wasn't
No.
what she was brought in at. She received some raises during that
I
time.
think she got
didn't
COLAs,
Yeah, she did, and she wasn't supposed to.
Right.
but there were no step increases.
There were no merit, no evaluations and a merit increase based on performance.
The commission had the authority to give her a merit increase if they chose. I don't know if they chose.
I don't think, well, we were
Correct.
broke the whole time. We couldn't justify when the staff was taking furloughs.
Well, there was a time period you weren't broke. There were a couple of years that you weren't
No,
broke. So I
we've
think
been broke since I came.
During the 5 years that I've been here, she never received a step increase or a merit increase. If there were any increases, it was COLA, which, as Tim has indicated, probably was never supposed to have happened in the first place, so.
And
I would just make one other comment about, that, maybe we're broke and, staff perception, what have you. again, the commission has the discretion to bring this person in at the bottom of the range. I mean, there's nothing that says that, you know, you have to bring them in at the former director's rate of pay.
Well, part of what you want to do is give yourself enough flexibility that ideally we attract some, you know, desirable candidates. And then the exact amount that a particular person would be offered is going to depend on their experience and their current rate of pay where they're working at, right?
That's
So if
major.
there's a very desirable candidate and, you know, they're earning this, you know, you got to pay them enough to get them to come. And I think by giving ourselves a range tied to data of competitors of what that number should be, you know, we give ourselves the wiggle room. You know, we don't want to overpay, but if there's a candidate we want, you know, and they're earning, you know, this, and we lock ourselves into this, you know, and we can't recruit them over $5,000 or something, you know, we'll be kicking ourselves.
And we had many conversations about this, and one of the things that Susan was quite articulate about was the fact of we want to be competitive and we want to have that ability to bring somebody qualified in and not limit ourselves.
And Patrick, we're, in the Bay Area, we're not the only one looking for a county librarian. Contra Costa.
Now, Contra Costa is currently looking for a director.
So we're in a little bit of competition, too.
And San Francisco is looking for a deputy librarian.
Yeah.
Yes, but we are a much nicer place to live than Contra Costa or San Francisco.
And
But
we
you
have
also, if
so
you bring
few
them-
problems, and they'll be coming into just such a wonderful.
If you bring them in at the top of the salary range, though, you'll have no place to reward them.
No, I
Right.
don't think we would bring them in at the
No,
top.
we're hoping
That's why-
at the top, my understanding is that the top that we would hope to bring them in is at the 80% top.
Which is 153.
153,000.
So, yeah, can I comment? That seems like a reasonable topping out range. As a former library director, that would have been quite a bump up from what I was making before, just down the road in lovely, poor Marin County. And I think we're in the middle of a class and comp study, are we not? So part of what's going to be the result of that class and comp study is every position that we have is going to be compared to the same set of benchmarks. And we may find ourselves facing recommendations for salary increases across the board in order to remain competitive. But we won't be able to implement those because we are, as we've noted, not exactly flush. So I think it's responsible to say we look towards improving salary ranges to come in line with the market over time. And part of what will have to happen after the class and comp study is done is we'll have to come up with a plan for how that could be possibly implemented for all the classes for which pay raises would be recommended. So, you know, trying to keep sort of the status quo right at the start of the end of the class and comp study, and then look at what would be our approach to implementing increases over time as we were able to if we improved our revenue situation, et cetera. That would go for the director as well as for everybody down the line. And so I kind of like this, the way it's proposed, even though I argued against it at the start. I like having the room to move eventually, but saying no at the start, we wouldn't bring someone in at that level because we're in a crunch and we're trying to evaluate our entire compensation structure.
Well, and I think even more importantly, you know, I really think you want to have the room for someone to see that there's opportunity to increase, you know. You bring them in at the top, there's nowhere to go. But we want to be competitive and try to get that good person.
I have a question about the future board actions, but is this the time and place to discuss
Future
that?
board?
Well,
Oh.
Selection.
it says final selection, we're in this, when do we establish the committee from the community? And I think we need to start doing that fairly soon, putting that together if we're going to start gathering the candidate pool. So where are we with that?
Well, that will happen in consultation with the search firm.
Okay.
So, assuming there's an approval this evening,
Right.
that conversation will start tomorrow.
Okay, because I just saw that
Yeah.
future actions was select the driver again, and I'm like, wait a minute.
No, there's a lot of in-between steps that
Yes,
have to happen.
okay,
Yes.
And that's all part of the proposal from the,
got it.
Right, and I just have one thing to say about that too. And the contract we had with Sandy, I recall looking at that with county council and feeling that it could be better, have been a little bit better written. So I'm hoping that that now would be the time to start working with county council to devise a draft contract for the next director.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Although I didn't think it was a bad contract, it just could have been tightened up a little bit.
Yeah, there are some areas that were hard for everybody to like understand. So anyway, I think that we could come up with a better contract.
okay? You got that note down there, guys? I see pens are writing, flitting across paper.
So do we
So-
have a motion?
So I'm waiting for a motion, I think is,
I move that we adopt the revised library director job description and proposed salary range.
that was by Julia, yes?
We need to add in there.
With the
that
word
one,
public.
Word public.
As with the friendly amendment made by Commissioner Whistler.
All right, thank you. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Did you hear that? All right. Any public comment?
Chase them all.
What's the problem? She needs to be sure that she knows who the names are. I just need to double check. All right? Any public comment? There being no public comment is closed. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? It passes. All right, moving ahead, approval of the search firm.
It looks good. I just have a question. Did you check with any of their references?
Yes.
Oh, the partial list of past claims, yeah.
And
Yeah, no yellow flags, red flags, or anything. And actually, the references on the two top agencies, the comments were basically the same, so.
And again, going back to in their proposal, under search schedule, when they talk about the search committee to interview selected candidates, does that mean the community-based committee? Or does that mean,
Which page are you on?
well, I don't have a page number. It's under search schedule on their proposal. And it says, our second step is to review, our typical executive search process is a two-step process for the search committee to interview selected candidates and requires 3 to 4 months to complete. When they talk about, and they talk about the search committee throughout their proposal, who is the search committee they're referencing?
They would be referencing whatever committee we put in place. They will be going through a process of identifying candidates and very possibly also going out and meeting those candidates. And then from those interviews, then making recommendations of a pool, which then we would have a committee that would be involved. So that's something that we would have to develop.
Okay. And are we doing that? I mean, my question, maybe I misunderstood your answer when I asked you earlier, and you said the search committee would help us with that. Do they get involved in us putting together that community-based committee?
What they will do, they'll act as a resource, offering us ideas and options, how you might want to structure the interview process, who should be part of that process. Should it be members of the community? Should it be other individuals? The subcommittee here and the commission will ultimately make those decisions about what that will look like. But again, there'll be a resource for ideas is what they'll be doing.
Okay.
guiding us.
And so I'm thinking that we need to start the process of setting up the community-based committee that we want to do the interviewing. And what steps have we taken towards that?
The only steps that have been taken so far have just been when we presented the original timeline proposal for the recruitment. That's been our initial step.
Okay.
The subcommittee at this point hasn't discussed in any detail what those selection committees would look like.
And I would like, this is just an idea, I would like at the January meeting that we have a discussion about proposals for involvement of staff and community. And then the subcommittee can take that and prepare, or else maybe before we even do that, the subcommittee can come up with a proposal of how to do it, and we can discuss it.
We had originally, when we had discussed the procedure we were going to use, one of the discussions and sort of underlying assumptions we made is that we would have this committee, and I think we'd sort of all agreed it would have a librarian from another county, and it would have, members of stakeholders and maybe a staff member and, kind of thing, but we didn't have details.
And there's questions involved in the process. For example, my experience has been is that the community committee then presented the board with 3 choices to choose from. The other possibility is that, that's one other way. And the other thing that I've heard in this process has been that you not only have one committee, you have like 2 or 3 committees made up of a mix of people. And
interview panels.
Yeah.
So there's a search committee that's coordinating the process, and that may comprise members of the community, the staff, et cetera. But then they would direct the setup of an actual interview process, which could include 3 panels of different types.
So you're thinking the search committee is different than the commission subcommittee? You're thinking of a
You could expand yourselves, yeah, I would say. You've already done a lot of the spade works, just, get more people involved, and you are the search committee.
Okay, so that.
Does that work?
And we're a search committee that will start in February, when
No, you're
we're a
starting.
new commission?
Well, you're starting now.
Okay.
Because you're hiring this firm now.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
And the other thing, though, is that if it is a community-based search committee that is structured properly, the fact that maybe people on it were on the commission but step off the commission, that doesn't mean they need to step off the committee. And so then you bring that knowledge and background to just saying.
I'd like to make a comment. The larger the committee is, the more unwieldy it will be.
I agree. So I don't know how many we want on
The
it.
commission has the responsibility for hiring the person, not the general public.
Right.
So I am extremely reluctant to have a setup where the general public is choosing the candidates.
Okay. And I don't think it's going to be
that's truly awful.
the general public, but I think you bring in stakeholders who are, yes, they're part of the general, but we're all part of the general public. So you bring in people who have some knowledge of some aspect of what's necessary for the director. You use also maybe an outside county library director to get the expertise from that area and from a neighboring county. And then you have, yes?
Could we have a proposal from the search committee?
From the current subcommittee?
Exactly, this
So-
subcommittee. Exactly what we want to do and how we're going to proceed and who's going to be in this, because we're all over the line.
Yeah, and so here's what my hope would be, and Patrick, you tell me this is realistic. So, the commission this evening approves, yes, move forward with these folks that we've read the proposals, you screened them, we're good with them. Then we have a call with them, we yes, tomorrow morning, so in this, shortly after
Right.
that, the call being, with the commission's subcommittee on this, and we work with them to come up with a very specific, a plan, because part of the reason we're hiring them, in addition to them sourcing candidates, is their best practices and their expertise, and they work with us on, okay, you should have 3 panels, or you should have 2, or you should have this mix, or 3 people, or 5 people, and here's the, and then we can come back to the broader commission and say, okay, the subcommittee, in partnership with these people that we've hired who have this content and this expertise, have come up with the plan, and here's how we integrate it in the community people, and here's how we integrate it in staff, and, the detail that I think you're looking for, which we don't have yet, and I'm hoping that these people we're hiring, are gonna be a
If we're
big part.
going to pay for expertise, let's take advantage of
Exactly,
it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I think if you look at the proposal, they do make mention of that. Their initial steps are to have specifically those kinds of meetings with the subcommittee, possibly even the commission, both to structure the process, but also to get input about what are the characteristics you're looking for in this director, so that they can then put together all the materials before putting out the recruitment.
And they're saying they'll come for that.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
I have one question, just can't get over this. These people are coming out of Kansas City. They have offices in Missouri, Illinois, and Ohio. They're doing this entire search, including their traveling expenses, for $24,000. That is the cheapest
We
thing
looked.
I have ever seen for a search firm.
What was interesting was we got a number of proposals, and they were all very tight in terms of the cost. The cost was, they had it written up a little differently, but they were really tight. They all came in close.
These people flying, maybe the
So-
guy just wants to spend January in Sonoma
Well, I
County
will
instead of
tell you-
Kansas City.
Well, it comes with a bike box. Oh, no.
But it was interesting to me that our decision was not driven by cost.
Yeah.
Because all of
All
them,
the same, similar.
The range was from about 21,000 to 25,000.
I mean, that's such a tight range from my,
That's, I mean, just the expenses on something like this. They will travel
Do we need a
to
motion?
interview these candidates. They have 2 or 3 candidates, and I assume they're not all in Kansas City. Airplane fares, everything.
Well,
I mean, I think it's terrific,
Yeah.
but
What is not included here would be the cost. At some point, we're going to bring the top
Yeah.
candidates here, and
They
they'll
don't
have
pay for that.
expenses.
Right, right.
They'll have
They did talk
plane,
about
and they'll
that.
have, and that's not part of
Approximate.
this.
Up to $1,000.
I'm astounded at this, really. But, I mean, that's terrific.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So they've only had dealings with one public library in California, it looks like.
Contra Costa,
The
did you talk to
Richmond,
them?
Richmond,
And they were happy?
Well, it was Richmond
yeah.
that that this particular agency did. And yes, they were very happy. And, I asked them why they selected this firm versus some other firms. And again, the response was they specialized in libraries, whether it was in California or the Midwest or whatever. Because like the Contra Costa right now is using a firm that doesn't specialize in libraries. They do libraries, but more broader public agency sector. San Francisco is using a similar firm, which isn't specializing in libraries, but all kinds of public agency top management positions. Well, Richmond and San Jose, for example, they selected these firms that we had looked at because they do specialize in libraries.
Which is good, yeah. So this isn't the contract, or is it? Because I would really like to ask that whatever contract we have with them gets reviewed by county council again, just so that we're covered. This is, it's not chump change exactly. It may be a really good deal, but we should have our own contract, and if that was the thought, then these could be attached as exhibits to the contract, but we should have our own contract and make sure that we're covered in every way that we need to be.
Okay with that, Patrick?
I'm fine. I mean, obviously what they have here, attachment 3, is just a sample, you know.
Right, but it should
So-
be our contract, and we could attach that as an exhibit.
Right, or county council can review it and say,
Right, and
this
say,
is fine
this is
with us.
fine,
and, you know,
exactly,
right.
yeah.
And just-
And then the thing about the background checks, you know, obviously we want background checks, and it was like, if you want background checks.
We want
So we want to
background
make
checks.
sure that
Yes.
that is part of the deal, that they will see that background checks are conducted.
Yeah, what they're referencing there is like a financial and criminal background check.
Exactly.
They're not
When they
talking
need
about
that.
reference checks. That's automatic reference checks.
Right.
But we want the fingerprint.
We do, yes, no,
want-
I agree.
Absolutely.
Whole shebang. All right.
And just for my information, does this get signed by the directors or by me?
How about you?
The directors, because it's less than
Okay.
whatever the amount is,
All right,
50,000.
so I don't have to come up here to sign something.
I have a question. The CFO recruitment, if we decide we want the firm's help with that, is there an additional fee?
Yes, there would be.
Do we know what that is?
I'm trying to think. No, we don't at this point. I thought, and I might be thinking of one of the other proposals, but they had broken down, you know, different levels of services. And so
That
and I
was one
believe
of
on
the
that, the one I'm thinking of, it was about $3,000, you know, to just do, basically where they're just gathering resumes and applications for you. You take it from there.
I think given if we've only had one application, clearly we need some help sourcing candidates.
And I also might add that when I was in the process of pushing Sandy that we really, really, really needed interim CFO, Nelson Services in Petaluma, I contacted them and they, about a possible interim, and they said they also can be involved in the search for a permanent. So that's a firm in Petaluma that,
I think they're based in Sonoma.
Yeah.
based in Sonoma? Okay. And they have an office in Petaluma then, I think. Okay.
Right, throughout, but their headquarters is in
Right, but anyway, they were recommended to me by Will.
Okay.
Yeah. But just,
But that was for an interim or
that was
permanent?
I was looking to them for a possible interim if we couldn't find something else. And they offered also they could help in a permanent search.
But we have till Friday.
But we don't meet with the commission until the end of January. I'm wondering if we can get any direction tonight about this, or do we go
Well,
ahead
let's
and
move on. Let's
engage?
do this. Let's talk about that in the manager's report,
Okay.
okay? Because let's move on with approval of this, well, because it's part of this.
Well, if we're talking
Well-
about engaging in a new contract in the next week or so,
Okay, so
what should be
can
included?
we move to approve this proposal and then give authority to our directors to engage this firm for the CFO search with a limit of up to an additional 5,000 if by Friday there's not a sufficient pool of candidates that have applied? Is that something we are allowed to do?
That's a separate item, and it's an action, that sounds like an action item to me, and
Well, it's not, we can't just, okay.
and I don't know that we can just,
Yes, but I don't think public. So would we have to have a special?
But I guess my question is, does it even require anything from the commission since the dollar amount is low?
no, I
I
don't
mean, if
think,
the directors just decide that we need to engage somebody,
Right.
whether it be this search firm or another, to just source candidates for us, you know, as long as it doesn't meet the dollar threshold, it seems to me that the director should just be able to
it
move
sounds fine
forward
with
with
me.
that, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think our direction is more, find somebody.
Right.
Do you have any friends
Apparently not.
who you'd like to take out for wine? All right, so we are currently on item 9.2.2, the approval of the search firm. And I just want to be sure and say this in the public, This $24,000 is coming from the savings in not paying the director's salary. Is that correct? So this is not additional funds from somewhere taking away from something? Okay, all right. So do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Tom has moved. Is there a second?
Sure.
Mary Evelyn seconded. Any comments from the public? There being no public comment, we will move on to. Well, we had Rebecca stand up once. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, moving right along, and I think we're doing fairly well.
You're such an optimist.
Approval of the all-staff day. Yet another closure day.
I move that the Sonoma County Library Commission authorize the interim library co-directors to close to the public all branches of the Sonoma County Library on Thursday, January 30th, in order to hold an all-staff day.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, that was Helena and Tom. Is there discussion?
I have
Yes.
a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
I would like us to evaluate if there is a way to do this. I'm in favor of staff training. I'm really concerned about yet another closure. You know, if there's a way to do it on a Monday, and I realize we'll have to pay, I presume we will have to pay people, because, you know, there'll be a cost. But I have worked for financial institutions where have had big training and brought everybody in on a Saturday because, you know, they wanted to have everybody in the room together. And I just would like us to explore if there's a way to fulfill the desire to do training, which I am for, without having yet another day that we're closed to our public, which I'm really concerned about that because there's so much sensitivity to it at this point.
I would also say the timing for me.
Right, exactly.
It's right after the other Saturday closure, you know, having it and right before the February Saturday closure. But the other part of it for me, I know you guys worked really hard with Don Schwartz to find a different date for the next JPA committee meeting, which is the one that may or may not approve, as we just heard from Healdsburg. Perhaps it's going to be a more interesting meeting than we thought. And your input at that meeting, I know, has been very much appreciated and valuable, and to have nobody from library management or staff be there, I think is, you know, I understand the desire for training, and I am all for it as well. On the other hand, what happens at that JPA committee is going to have an impact on this library for 35 years? Is that when the last time we did this was?
In the Ford administration.
Yeah.
Make it sound like it was
So-
like ancient history. It's amazing.
Well, in 1970, it was
75.
pre-Prop 13, let's just put it that way. So I have a concern about the date itself as more than the concept.
We could, but we don't have the cost.
So we don't have a costing for a Monday training option. That's a very nice idea, but we would have to pay everybody, and it would be over and above the 40-hour payment. So it would probably be time and a half for each of those people to bring them here. This is a legally mandated training, and we had considered rolling it out as a roadshow, but we were just overwhelmed by the logistical problem inherent in that kind of an approach. Every staff member has to have this training.
Is there a deadline by which they have to have it? I think we're past the deadline.
Sooner rather
aren't we?
than later. There's no formal deadline.
It's not a formal deadline, so we just put this off indefinitely.
There's also the
Sometime
service
after
awards.
February 15th.
Oh, yeah, the service awards are another component of this day.
We were trying to squeeze it in January because the service awards are those from 2013. So we would be awarding the 2013 service awards in 2014.
Is there
Well-
a way to do it in a half day? I'm just throwing out ideas, you know, and pay people to come in like half day on a Monday? instead of a full 8 hours? I mean, I don't know what's entailed in the training of how many hours it takes to deliver it.
I'm looking at Patrick again.
I don't think so.
I'm just not certain we can do it in a half day. It's really, really tight because there's a review of all the procedures, which are all safety related with all staff. But then part of it was also going to be a workshop on, dealing with problem behaviors, patrons or staff. And, and that's a good 2 hours in and of itself. And then, of course, the service awards, so.
How much time for the mandated part, or is all of that mandated?
Well, basically all of it except for the service awards is mandated.
We were hoping to squeeze in something that was not boring mandated training, like that actually had to do with libraries. Might be nice. We don't have a lot of opportunity to travel to conferences or anything here, so.
Where are you planning to do this?
Here.
Having all staff?
In this room.
In this room.
Wow, does this hold that many people?
It's been done before, apparently.
Isn't there a sign that says?
Maximum number of persons, 195 or
We're good.
That works.
35. I don't know
Well-
what that actually says.
I realize there's a cost, I just
Yeah.
think we need to balance closing another day to the public versus how can we accomplish the goal?
Yeah.
I'm not wild about closing another day, but I can live with it, except not when it is, not
Yeah.
when it's like the 5th closed day in a month.
So then it wouldn't work in January or February or March.
After February 15. Between February 15 and March 29th or whatever it is.
Okay.
That's 6 weeks. People will have forgotten about it. But if you do it every 2 weeks for a month, you'll be strung up by the public.
This may be a silly suggestion, but would it be impossible to do it this month? I mean, the week between Christmas and
No.
New Year's, you can't
No way.
do it.
That was a definitive answer.
Yeah, much more definitive than I was.
I've got to give at least 3 weeks notice for the presenter
Oh, I see.
so that already takes us to Christmas.
Well,
So
just do
the-
it on Christmas Day.
So if I-
Have a Christmas party and a train.
Oh, that'd be so nice for our staff.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we'd all love coming in to give service awards too. I'm hearing overall a reluctance to do it, but we want to, we will, except for maybe one person. But then the rest of what I'm hearing is, can you put it off till March,
Or after February 15th.
after February 15th?
Like February 29th, except there isn't one this year. February 27th would be a Thursday. I don't know, we were hoping, as Jamie said, to have it encompass our service awards.
Well, we still could.
Yeah, it still would have to if we did it then, or we would try to find an alternate time to do those. I don't know. It's always hard to be one half of a brain, you know? That's-
So you're, so it looks like you're going back to not having the commissioners hand those out for the service awards?
We would have the commissioners hand them out
We
at
would
the
get to
all-staff day.
attend on this day.
You just wouldn't have to go to each individual branch.
We don't have to go to the safety training, though.
Well, I don't know, I thought they did, don't they have to come, Patrick? Is that part of it?
Well, if I come, I'm getting
We'll
time
pay
and
you
a half.
time and a half. Double your time, in fact.
So let's figure this out and move.
Okay.
Julie's turning into a pumpkin.
Yes, it happens at 10 o'clock.
I know, and we're getting close.
You have cookies that you
What do you say? Can you,
Yeah, I think February 27th could work if you're still willing to
So can we just
let the
change
library
date?
close it all.
okay, so there's a friendly amendment to change it to February 27th.
That's less than 2 weeks after the other closure, though.
I know.
It feels different because it's not in between two others.
And
It's
also,
that
it
boom,
lets
boom,
you
boom.
guys come to the meeting on the 30th.
Yeah.
Which is crucial.
Well, I think it's important.
All right. So there is a motion on the floor amended to say February 27th. Is there any more commission statement before we take a vote?
Any more impact from the co-directors if we did that, other than a pushback to service or
No, no.
no impact?
All right. Is there any comment from the public? There being no public, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of this? Aye. Opposed? All right, I'm not sure if there's an abstention. Is there an abstention?
So I'm an aye.
Aye, okay, it was voted by ayes. All right. All right, approve library, okay, approve adjustment to photo reprint fees.
I so move.
Second.
All right, there is some discussion.
Yeah, I feel like I'm beating the same old drum tonight, but I think we should go talk to people about it before we change the fees. And I don't know, maybe they already have, I don't know, I would assume there is sort of a universe of users, a sort of a smaller universe of users that access
Very
this.
small universe of users.
And I don't know if they've been notified that there's a,
They've been told, and they've been asked to voluntarily make up the difference for the past number of months, because this is a cost recovery item
right,
purely. And at this point, we are paying more for the service than we're charging to the patrons. I did get opinion from county council, and I have an email here saying that as far as state law goes, county free libraries, while generally prohibited from charging fees, are given exceptions for charges for services that are not classified as library service. This is one of those, because it is not an expectation that a person would normally be able to take one of these items home. We're providing them with something they can keep. We can charge them for it. So this is really pretty much a formality. It's not like changing the fines where you do have to have a public hearing and then come back a month later and vote on it then. It's a different kind of fee altogether. It's like a copy machine more, where suddenly if the copy machine company started charging us a lot more, we would just have to raise that rate.
and again, I really believe that, just like when I would go overboard in consulting with the public, even when it's not necessary, until they come back to trusting us that we're not going to do things behind their back. And I know, they could come, they could be here, there's an agenda, but that's not how the public thinks, and that's not how the labs think. And I am just so tired of being yelled at that we didn't ask them when we had an issue before us, before we voted on it. So I guess my question is, I know we're losing money, do we need to do this tonight, or do we have time to go to the labs and ask them?
I think it's a non-issue, and if you go to the labs, they will say, what is this all about?
I think if we want the labs to participate in important decisions,
Right.
we need to not beleaguer them with minor things that are,
I disagree. I think you start getting in the habit of presenting things and getting them to respond, and presenting things and getting them to respond, and you don't just save up something big. I mean, you practice, you work on the communication, and you do it with everything. I disrespectfully disagree that you just present kind of bigger things, because then you are the one deciding what's big enough for the lab. And I think that's one of the objections that I keep hearing, is that we are filtering what the labs get told and what we ask for feedback on.
Don't all the labs have access to the posted agenda?
Yes, that's
This
what
is,
they expect.
I hear you what you're saying,
Move
but this,
fast.
as I really, it just seems like,
Well,
this has been,
I sort of feel like it's a waste of our time to discuss it, much less have the labs discuss it.
I know
well-
the two labs that I service, they would say, what are you talking about?
Right, why are you bothering me?
Yeah, they just don't.
And I think you've raised an interesting issue, but I think you also raised an issue that is going to clog up the machine. And I agree with you that we need to deal with how it almost becomes like super micromanaging. That if the library is going to want to do something in 3 months, they need to tell us 4 months ahead so that we can then get input on virtually everything.
Not virtually everything, but the things that directly affect the public. When you go to the desk, how much money do you have to pay for something? That directly affects the public. When you go to the library, are the doors open or not? That directly affects the public. I think those are the questions that the public expects us to ask them before we make the decisions. I don't think everything. I'm not saying we should discuss with the public before we pick the search firm. If they wanted to be here, they could have. But the things that directly affect the service we provide and how the public receives it, yeah, I think they expect us to ask them.
I have a suggestion, Julia, and I've actually tried this and I haven't gotten much of a response, but one thing that we as commissioners can do is to look at the agenda in enough time to email our lab and say, hey, the agenda's posted, please check it out. Here are some items, you might be specifically interested in. Here are items that I really would like feedback from you on. So that might be one way to try it. Not every lab meets every month.
Right.
So it's impossible to try, to get to all of them, but this would give them a heads up, an opportunity to say, yeah, I have, the agenda, there is something I'm interested in. If you as a commissioner, if we try it that way and see what kind of response we get, that might be one way to start making sure that they feel that we're asking them about stuff that they might think is important at some point.
Okay. Any further comment? I think there's two issues here. One of them is this specific one, and the other one is that the one that Julia is raising that has come up several times, and that is the policy or attitude about involving the public. And I think that's one that really needs some thought, and I don't know exactly how we'll do that, but I think that's true. But I'd like to proceed, since also we have to finish in a certain amount of time, to the vote on this particular proposal, and then we can go on. So are all those in favor of adopting the policy change? Aye. Opposed? All right. One opposed. The email use policy. And this has been discussed by the Labor Management Committee?
Yes.
Okay.
I move that the Library Commission adopt the email use policy for staff.
Second?
Second.
Seconded by Susan?
I have questions.
All right.
On page 2, B2, when it says subject to review by the library, who is that? What does that mean?
I'm trying to think of a situation when we would ever do that, but I think it,
Is it management? I mean, I think we need to specify who in the library gets to review somebody's email, instead of just saying the library.
okay.
I'm just saying.
So it could say library management.
Yeah, library management.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. You can just add management in if that's who it means. Or did you mean everybody's supervisors? Does it include branch managers? I mean, I think we need to define the scope of who gets to look at somebody's email.
Okay, I'm thinking of the IT staff because they are really the people that can directly put their hands on it.
But wouldn't they do it at the direction of somebody? who
Well,
would be,
but you might have IT that identifies inappropriate website usage themselves first and then makes management aware of it. I mean, I've been in that situation, sadly.
So I'm just saying, I think we
This is
want to define
specifically
who can
email.
look at.
Well, okay, but if somebody emails pornography to someone else, IT may identify that occurring and bring it to management's attention as opposed to management directing.
But,
You know.
I'm not sure that they would unless they're monitoring everybody's email. How would they see that? So I would think that they would be directed to do it by.
But I don't think we need to say what the chain of looking at it's going to be. We just need to identify who might look at it, I think.
Library management.
Library management.
Subject to review by library management or staff at the direction. I mean, IT is not library management. Are they both management now? No. So I'm just saying. And then the other question I had was, okay, oh, you say it over here, actually, only administrative and network staff have the right to this access. When we have the list of things they're allowed to and not allowed to use the email for, are they allowed to use the email for union matters?
Yes. I mean, they have their own separate listservs for union business.
Oh, they do?
And that's primarily what they use.
But if they wanted to put out a all-staff email with a union announcement, that would be allowable?
Like, for instance, the poll we asked them to take recently, they did that on their union email addresses, not the libraries. Isn't there something in the MOU that allows them to use the library's email system for,
Okay.
I don't remember the wording, but it's general announcements or something of that nature?
I forget the exact wording.
So should there be a reference to that in here
I
that's
just-
spelled out there?
I guess the only issue with that is that's in the MOU, and the MOU changes, you know. You'd need to change the policy if the MOU were to change, so.
So it could just say, and as
Specified.
indicated in the MOU.
Where would you envision that
I
being
don't know.
placed? Okay.
It could be an A4.
Maybe it doesn't need to say it. I just was wondering if it included that or not.
Well, it should, it probably, if it's
Maybe in
written
C.
someplace else.
It says, it's right there,
A3.
consistent with any items in the current memorandum of understanding. So it's there.
That's covered.
That's right there.
Okay. Any further, I'm not wanting to to rush us along, but I'm wanting to rush us along. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the library email use policy
With that one change.
with
right?
that one change? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Whew. Salary and benefits. Do I have a motion? This just takes basically what we agreed with the union to put on to the rest of the employees.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, did you
Aye.
get those? Paul moved and seconded by Susan. Is that right? All right, any discussion? Public comment? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. I mean, I'm in favor. All right, now, management report. Now, my problem is that we get to these things really late.
We won't take any more than a couple hours here, so,
Okay.
really.
One of the items I said we put off to here, which is find us a CFO,
Okay.
all right?
A lot of this stuff you already know, so we don't really need to belabor much of anything. Let's see, is there anything here that you
I have a question.
don't know? Yeah, ask a question. That's a good way. That'd be the best approach. Oh, please.
I'm very
It's
inquisitive.
about time, Julia.
I know I'm a little shy about this, but let me just say, the county's good with our giving them our budget late?
The county is, okay, so let's not put it that way.
Oh, okay.
Let's reset that a little bit. We had a long conversation, Bruce and I, late last week.
Excuse me, our budget adjustment, not our actual.
Right, our budget adjustment with Don Schwartz. And by the end of the several hours we were on the phone with Don, we wore him down. Okay, so what he agreed to was that we should, as the library management team, send over to him on the date specified in their budget schedule what we would be bringing to you for your approval, with the understanding that you may change that for mid-year budget adjustments we're talking about right now. So the due date for those to the county is like the 24th of January, and you don't meet till the 27th. And we couldn't get them together in time for this meeting, so that would have meant we would have had to schedule a special meeting of the commission. You want that? No, you don't want that. So the best thing would be if we could do as Don asked, get those numbers to him, because they built themselves a 5-week landing pad for those numbers before they have to bring them to the Board of Supervisors. So we're going to be like in this huge stack of budget adjustments from all the county departments and agencies and the library. And we should be put at the bottom of the stack so they get to us last. So by the time they get to us, the commission will have met and any changes will be incorporated into any final budget adjustment proposals or submissions to the county. I think that's about how it plays out. Bruce, did I get that right?
Right on the mark.
Okay, that's the plan, is to fudge it a little bit and get everything to them when they want, but it might not be everything exactly as the way it plays out by the time you guys have been around with it.
Okay, thank you.
Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
Only took a few hours. So that was in there. Let's see. Yeah, so that's an update on the update on the budget process. Wine Museum, the word partnership is used here, perhaps a little precipitously, but John, our fabulous wine librarian, was asked by these people who are trying to organize a wine museum to be the coordinator of their story. Every museum tells a story through its artifacts, and they have to organize that, and they thought John would be a good guy to do that, so they asked him to, so he asked us if he could, and we said yes, and what's this museum got in terms of space, you know, and should we be talking to them about possibly having a portion of, or the headquarters of, or some aspect of the wine library in there along with it, so that the public could get at it at the same time they're getting at the museum. So we're going to meet with the developer on Wednesday morning, get a walk through of the space, and just see what sort of atmosphere there is of that. We've already talked with Bo up at Healdsburg about this, and he said, oh, they've tried that twice before, it never works. So it might not work at all, and that would actually be just fine. We have a wine library already, so, but it's just a possibility for a partnership going forward. It's kind of neat.
Along those lines, next Saturday, there will be a book sale at the Hillsburg Wine Library, of wine books, exclusively wine books. And from what John tells me, he's discovered a treasure trove of wine books in the bowels of this building.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got flooded.
And they're all going to be brought up, and some of them are, I guess, real classics. So anybody who has a real interest in wine, or if you know anybody who does, tell them about that. It will really be, it's a one-day opportunity to buy some really extraordinary books about wine.
I'm an expert in whining, but not wine.
No whining.
know.
I really wanted to.
I have one
Yeah.
question down here before I forget, and you'll probably
Okay.
think this is a silly question,
Oh, I
but
doubt it.
under the vendor change for at the FSA program, yeah, and it sounds great, sounds like a really good opportunity the county's given us to change, but when I saw the use of a debit card, It just reminded me that sometimes when people have gotten those debit cards, there've been additional fees attached to them, and I just want to make sure that's not the case.
That's not the case.
Okay.
Patrick is shaking his head. So I want to jump back up to library support group efforts for a second, just to especially call out something that is happening sort of at this very moment, which is we have librarians in Guadalajara, Mexico, at the International Book Fair, and it has been very exciting for them, and we really want to recognize the Library Foundation's gift of $10,000 towards buying Spanish language materials over this past weekend. That's a pretty amazing level of support. So, and then a lot of friends groups also ponied up, and I've called them all out here. So thank you to all of those groups for supporting that collections effort. Yay, I get to be a collections person. And Tim just got reminded of something.
I just was reminded again about one of the things that didn't come up in the work session, about I know it was mostly about hours, but one of the things that I think needs to be mentioned often is that our materials budget has stayed stagnant. And in essence, that's been a decrease in our materials budget because costs have gone up. And it
And I
was,
think we did actually decrease it, did we not, last year?
And the year before.
and that we need to pay attention. That's another item that is needing to not get lost in the picture. That's all.
Well, one thing in the audit that Will pointed out is that the library has this policy that if library books are sold, that money is supposed to go back to purchasing other books for the library. So I'm not sure that happens everywhere.
I think it probably happens much more. I mean, more than, and we get more back from the Friends than what they make selling our discards.
Okay, it didn't sound
To
like.
buy materials.
It didn't sound like Will thought that always happened, so.
It might not be a
it's
direct
something that
one for one.
we should probably look at and make sure that it does.
Where exactly was that in the report?
He just talked about how that is a library policy. I could find it for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you wanted to highlight in the management report?
No?
Okay, also, I'll raise the issue that we want people to keep doing their evaluations and et cetera. Okay, okay. The other piece of this is, I've been so good and now it's getting confused here. All right, go ahead.
It's on page 12. About the middle of the page, underneath where it talks about capital assets, the paragraph starts out, the library's collection of library books is not capitalized. This collection is unencumbered, held for public exhibition and education, protected, cared for, and preserved, and subject to the library's policy that requires proceeds from the sale of these items to be used to acquire other collection items.
Yeah, like I said, I think if we did a dollar for dollar analysis, we'd be way over. I mean, we'd be getting way more back. Well,
Okay.
yeah, we could.
There's one document here, updating us of sustainable staffing costs presented to the commission.
Yes.
All right? What is that?
We're going to get a full report later.
Tonight,
Right now.
Oh, it says at an upcoming meeting,
at this upcoming meeting.
this upcoming meeting. All right.
Sorry, we have a handout coming around. And Bruce will explain
Only gave us one.
the low-tech PowerPoint.
Can I-
Whoa. So the backfill costs are less? Oh, there were two here.
I think this is a conversation we should definitely have when the public is here. If we're changing the numbers of what they heard,
Well, let's just hear it now, and we can
Okay.
discuss it later.
We needed to get this number out there so the old number's not floating around too much longer.
Right, but,
Right.
okay.
And again, this is the meeting, this is the public meeting notice
Right.
and
Okay, so basically you're saying that the cost is, instead of 303,000, it's 272,000?
Yes.
So it's less.
Less.
Good.
And, you know, I know it's late, so I'll go real quick, and if I'm going too quick, you know, let me know. You know, just continuing to look at the work that we did before and reviewing the assumptions, a couple things surfaced. One, the assumption relating to the cost of the backfilled employees, the assumption relating to the amount of time off requiring backfill, and the calculation of the benefit costs to provide the backfilling. And on the assumption relating to the cost of the backfilled employees, the original assumption was that it was priced at the current salary, and the thought there was that when somebody took some time off, there would be a comparable person backfilling them. But as we talked about this more, it became clear that really what happens is an extra help employee at step one is backfilling. It's for the vast majority of them. So that you know, just in theory, you know, I just knew that was going to have an impact on the original calculation. It was going to lower it. The assumption relating to the amount of time off requiring backfill, we had the opportunity to analyze the 2012-13 year, you know, the prior fiscal year, for the actual time off. And after Patrick had spent a lot of time and the two of us kicking it back and forth, so to speak, it became clear that the original assumption for sick leave was a little high, but for the vacation time off that I had on the original report, it was low. And where it was low is in the other types of time off that weren't considered. And so we went through and did a calculation, and it added about 1,125 hours in terms of time off that should have been priced out. The other item was there was an error in part of the calculation for benefit costs for some of the cells, and so we went ahead and fixed, you know, had to make that correction as well. So now the last slide, I brought up the slide that you actually saw a week ago, and I did the strike through on the original numbers just to show where the changes were. And as you can see, there's additional hours timed off. It's about 4.45 FTE now, so it would still be about 20 additional employees in smaller pieces being used. The vacation other time goes up significantly. The sick time gets cut in half. The benefit cost gets dropped quite a bit. And then another thing, while we were reviewing this actual information from a year ago, it became apparent that mileage is also a major factor with this backfilling, that we're paying people to drive all over the county, in essence, when they're backfilling. You know, it's not just, they don't just have a home branch. You know, there might be backfilling here or down at Roner Park or up at, you know, somewhere else. So mileage becomes a significant item, and associated other costs, with adding people onto the payroll and those kinds of items. So you end up with a total that's about, what, almost $30,000 less. And I just thought it was important to get this out, primarily, what David said, so that these people won't be looking at the other numbers. And as we move forward in setting priorities and in the budget process, there'll be time to understand that this is the number for the sustainable staffing, as opposed to, the prior numbers. That's it.
It's nice that it's lower. Any comments or questions from commission? Any comments from the audience? All right. Since there's no action, we'll just move ahead. The financials. I do have a question about the line. This line is already used 78% because of the Petaluma self-check project. Is that I thought the expenses for that were being covered from the Buffum Trust, so it's just is it a budget issue? Because that money is supposed to be coming from the Buffums.
Which line are you looking at?
It's line 8562. It's in the narrative. It's the bottom of the narrative. Here comes somebody who can fill us in on that.
The 3 self-check units were separate. I think you're mixing the circulation desk model with the capital.
The self-check, okay.
Yes.
This is the self-check project?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I have one other, I think, management report question. I haven't heard anything further on the idea of changing the hours of the annex. Is that proceeding?
You're right, you haven't heard that. It sort of slipped off my horizon.
I
need
think
to
it
bring
goes
that.
back to that, don't touch the hours with a 10-foot pole notion.
Yeah.
Even though we really would like to make that minor tweak, it feels like opening up a can of worms.
Okay.
But I'm happy to open that can if you direct me to,
Oh,
because
yeah, that's what I'm going to say. Open a can of worms. Go ahead. All right. We're moving on to library board appointments. Is that the next thing?
That's right, these are the 3 youth members being appointed to the Guerneville Library Advisory Board. Can I just say all their names?
I wish you would. You would like to?
I move by resolution that the Sonoma County Library Commission appoint Faith Oliver, Isabella Negri, and Mary Rose Olin to youth member positions, each of which would be for a term ending June 30th, 2015.
Any second?
Second.
All right, seconded by Paul. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, now we're on to the item that we forgot last time, which is the items to include in lab notes. A review of well, first of all, one thing that comes to mind is the change of venue. That decision and the pilot aspect of it. The fact that we've hired a firm for the director's search and completed the job description and salary range. Any other things that people think of? Oh, there's somebody down there who has go ahead.
I think we should send them the holiday schedule.
Really? Yes, okay, the holiday schedule. We might, depending on how soon it goes out, we might want to mention that there's been a letter from the commission against the inequity, against the provision in the JPA, and perhaps mention when the JPA subcommittee is meeting again.
Yes.
Um, Other items? That are important to include?
Should we tell them that the January meeting will be elsewhere?
Well, and we should also make sure that that's stated, but that's, we've changed the venue. We've said changing the venue,
We should include the revised fee schedule that we just approved.
right? We've revised the fees for the photo reprints. Other items that people want to be sure that their lab's here?
Do you want to mention the all-staff day? In terms
Yes,
of, that would be
thank
a
you.
closure day?
And we need that to be phrased in such a way that it's almost obligatory. That it's,
Does this go to every lab member or just the chair?
it goes to every lab member.
Every lab member.
And as a matter of fact, I'm thinking of having it included, I'd like to have mine go to the city council, Petaluma.
Well, if the new JPA goes through, there's like mandatory reporting of some sort to the city councils. There is, they wrote it into the JPA about.
Did they wind up writing that in?
Oh, that's
I
an
thought that-
annual, isn't that the annual thing for their
Have my people been
representative?
going to your
I think it
meetings?
has, they also have minutes or something in there, I'm not sure.
Wow.
Okay, I don't know whether we want to include that. I think there were some significant issues raised in the audit. I don't know whether we want to include that.
We don't want to
Include
just.
the awards that day for the staff training? Might be.
We should maybe tell them we approve the audit and copies of it are available to view on wherever
Right.
we post them.
Are you suggesting that we recognize the awardees in this lab
I would
notes?
think that would be nice.
This is going to be a long lab
If
note.
there's room.
Yeah.
But I think it also may be useful to mention that we are about to embark upon the budget process, and that, you know, that we're at the end of the year and we're looking toward the next year, and that perhaps their commissioners will be in the next few months discussing budget issues with them
And priorities.
and priorities. And I think we might, I mean, we're making an 18-page thing
Tell them
here.
we're all very tired.
But I lost it. Oh, we continue to need to face the issue of the unfunded retirement. I don't know that we need to say that, but that's a significant issue that came up tonight. All right, are there any further things? I see people out the door already. Shall I declare us adjourned? All right.
Excellent.